Hello to all 41 of our wonderful viewers. So far, this is a pretty momentous stream. Definitely the best viewership we've had since the Georgia special election coverage earlier this year. So we're happy to get started. Tonight, we're covering two hotly contested congressional primaries. The first is occurring in Ohio's 11th district, which is based around Cleveland and Akron. It's the only VRA seat in the state of Ohio. It was represented now it's going to be an open special election race between Nina Turner and Shontel Brown. And in many respects, as both Joe and I have written about in our previous two articles, it's really setting up an ideological battle within the Democratic electorate between the progressive wing and the establishment wing. Shontel Brown is endorsed by Hillary Clinton. Jim Clyburn, the House Majority Whip, came to campaign for Brown in the final weeks of the campaign. And on the other hand, Nina Turner has attracted the support of prominent progressives like Bernie Sanders, with whom she worked on the 2020 presidential campaign that he ran, and AOC, who obviously has risen to great progressive stardom since she unseated Joe Crowley in the primary in 2018 in New York. And our second race is down in Ohio's 15th district. Partisan-wise, obviously not as lopsided for one party. It's about a Trump plus 15 district or so, but we rate it as safe Republican. And that race is also interesting. Certainly not as much media attention or polling coverage of that 15th district race to replace Steve Stivers, who resigned to become CEO of the Ohio Chamber of Commerce. But the race is interesting there because it's really the first chance we get, special election or not, to see whether or not a Trump-endorsed candidate can win in a primary that only Republicans can vote in. So Texas 6, a lot of people have made arguments that it's a referendum on the Trump endorsement, but we really don't know how big of an impact Democratic voters had on spoiling the election for right. So I would just focus on this. The Trump candidate is Mike Carey. He works for American Consolidated Natural Resources, which is an energy firm. He ran for office once in the 90s and lost. So he's really touted his outsider image and touted the Trump endorsement. If you look at his ads, they clearly note the Trump endorsed candidate. And then the other two major candidates, Jeff Luray from Fairfield County, a state representative, he's touted his endorsement from Steve Stivers, the outgoing congressman, and then Bob Peterson, a state senator, and he actually represents a Senate district that takes in most of the rural territory in the seat. So the bulk of the Democratic and Republican votes are going to come out of the Franklin County portion, mostly Columbus suburbs. In a congressional race, typically leans Republican, but competitive for Democrats as well. Stivers won by 26 and won that portion about 52-47 last time. So we're going to be watching that. And the district also has Athens County in it, which is smaller in population, but you're going to see a lot of Democratic votes there that are meaningful, especially in the Democratic primary, where the front runner is State Representative Allison Russo. So without further ado, let me just briefly talk about Ohio, the 15th district here, because there's some information about early voting. So Henry Olson on Twitter, RRH, retweeted this, but the total early vote, including the Democratic primary, was 10,537, which is pretty ridiculously low, as he notes. And there's been a lot of independent spending in this campaign to balance it out. But I just wanted to tell you that. And he also said that the early vote in that race should drop shortly after the election. And we'll keep you updated on coalitions and where the candidates are from as the county results come in, thanks to our friends at RRH. And we're also using the Washington Post for updates as well.
Mm-hmm. And we've actually got the first results in for the in the Republican primary and the Democratic primary in District 15. Right now, this is only the Franklin County portion. Mike Carey is leading that 30%, 30.4% to 21.4% for Jeff Luray. And then Stephanie Kunze behind at 15.6%. The Democratic side, much less competitive. Allison Russo is leading that one 87 to 13. This is, again, only the Franklin County portion. So this is the most this is one of the more populated portions and one of the most Democratic portions of the district relative to other, aside from places like Athens County, which is a weird county in that it's a college county that has not voted Republican in a very long time. But it actually has trended Republican. Even in 2020, it gave Trump 3% more compared to Biden getting 2% more from Hillary Clinton. So Even a county like Athens in this portion of Ohio, which is a college county, is kind of a bum deal for this. But yeah, that's the early results in so far from the 15th district. We're still waiting for anything in from the 11th district, which is of course the hotly contested Democratic primary there, which is I think the in terms of what political observers are looking for, it's the most important one of the night. Definitely in terms of how the Democratic field and how the Democratic Party is wanting to move going forward. One of the ugliest races too, for that matter.
In the 15th, I'd also look at Thomas Wang because he spent over $500,000 on this race. And in a district where your ability to buy media coverage pretty much allows you to gain name recognition unless you represent a part of the seat in the state legislature, that could be notable. But briefly to comment on those Franklin results, again, the bulk of the primary vote from both parties and the general election vote comes from that Franklin portion. It's the most populated part of the seat. Mike Carey is in Columbus, so he lives at the outer reaches of that Franklin County portion. But it's also interesting to see Stephanie Coons in third place. It's possible, in fact, looking at that Twitter thread I was mentioning earlier, Henry Olson was noting how Stephanie Coons should win the portion of the district in Franklin because she represents it as a state senator. So again, that's definitely somewhat good for Carey to start. It is his home county. But the thread talked a little bit more about how Carey would probably have a better time in neighboring Madison because you don't have a legislator running there. There's a lot of regional support. So if Coons can't use that to win or at least come close, then she might not be a viable contender. But again, it's still early, and we're only getting early votes so far.
Any thoughts on this, Joe, about the Ohio 15 race? I know you just wrote an article earlier today about the Ohio 15 and what it could what it could pretend for the future of the Trump endorsement at minimum.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, of course, a ginormous primary. There's a lot of serious candidates in there. Obviously, of course, the Trump endorsed Mike Carey, but also State Representatives Jeff LaRay and Bob Peterson and State Senator Stephanie Coons is in there. Both Ron Hood and Thomas Wang have both tried and spent lots of money to try and make some name for themselves. But, there's a lot of candidates in this race. But really, most of the time, usually that Trump endorsement, would normally clear the field. But clearly in this special election, it hasn't. Obviously, Carey has a lot of opponents to try and face off up against today. And it's really interesting. Obviously, he's leading very early right now. But a lot of people from what I've talked to were concerned about Carey's appeal outside of this Franklin-Madison area. Like Harrison mentioned, the regionalism in this primary could be massive. And, these are some deep red Republican-friendly areas out here. Really other than Athens, basically everywhere else is pretty deep red Republican-friendly area. So, it's hard for me to. I mean, look, if this is an early numbers, of the nearly 1,500 votes we have seeing right here, certainly not awful. But they don't necessarily mean a whole lot. As of yet, we're gonna want to see, start to see places, from a lot more areas and a lot redder areas than this part of Franklin is really showing.
Yeah. It's worth noting, I think Joe made a very good point, which is that this district really, although it looks fairly compact, aside from that Franklin County portion, which some of it is drawn due to the city boundaries of Columbus, others to protect the black community in there, and others to keep the incumbents intact. But there's a big divide between this Columbus portion, which is urban and suburban. Columbus is the fastest growing city in Ohio. It's one of the fastest growing in the region. Very, very boom sort of area for Ohio. That region is very different from the Appalachian portion. Even places like Athens County, which is still predominantly Democratic, is much more similar to somewhere like a Watauga County in North Carolina, right? It's in the mountains. The urban core around the university is liberal, but the rest of it's much more traditional, like the rest of the region. So those areas, even though they're adjacent to the Columbus portion, have different priorities and different goals of what they're looking for a representative. We don't know if that will help or hurt Carey. He has the Trump endorsement, obviously, but there could be a regional impact here. Most of the votes will come out of that Franklin portion, but if one candidate can coalesce the rest of that district, that could make this thing a lot more of a race.
Just to briefly go over where the regional bases are going to be. For people that aren't sure, this is Athens County over here, so smaller population, but certainly more Democratic votes. And this is the Franklin portion with the Columbus suburbs. This is where Coons and Cary are based. Now, it's been noted that Cary could also do well in Madison and Pickaway because you don't have any necessary, especially in Madison, there's not really a regional base there. And there are some votes that just came in Pickaway with Cary ahead. But just to finish, in Fairfield, that's where Jeff Lurie is in the state, or Jeff Lurie, that's where he is in the state house. And then Bob Peterson's Senate district pretty much runs all along here, taking in some of these ruby red, more Appalachian style counties.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was about to say that Pickaway where numbers come in. Cary, again, this seems to be very early vote because there's not a whole lot here, folks, from what we can see. But Cary leads here, but it's a very different 1, 2, 3. It's Bob Peterson in second place and Ron Hood in third place here. So certainly Cary still has the lead, but we kind of see, I think, especially Bob Peterson kind of taking a step up there. A lot of people are kind of saying that a lot of people would believe that if there was a non-Cary candidate to win tonight, a lot of people were thinking that'd be Bob Peterson at the tonight that people thought.
And 10,537 early votes are going to report. That's the total number cast across both primaries. So I'm not sure about the specific Republican number.
Ooh, but we have we also have numbers in from Hocking County according to DDHQ, which is Mike Cary in first at 40.7%, followed by Ron Hood at 25.1%, and Jeff Lurie at 10.2%. So those are three very different top threes, but the consistent thing among them is that Mike Cary is in first place. If you're Mike Cary, that's what you want to see. You want to see these other opponents in this crowded field doing different in their home bases, doing not coalescing anywhere, and then yourself leading in every single county. That's the way you win these sort of really heavily split ones. Yeah.
If you crush the regional coalitions like that, it basically, if Lurie isn't winning in Fairfield and Peterson doesn't take at least a few of those rural counties in the Senate district, then that's very bad news for both of them.
Mm-hmm. And this is, again, according to DDHQ. They're the only ones with this result, this updated result so far. And, of course, on the Democratic side, it does still look like Allison Rudo is, I would say, if this holds up, she's definitely going to be the Democratic nominee. Although it's worth noting that we do have this race at safe Republican. This is a Trump plus 14 district. There is very, very little chance Democrats are even competitive in this seat. I would personally be surprised if it's within 20, given the partisanship of the district, the partisanship of Ohio, and just how things kind of trended in off year. That would really, really surprise me. This is a good question from the Trailer 50. Even if Cary wins in Ohio 15, what % would he need for it to be considered a victory for Trump? Can't imagine a true victory if Cary only wins with 20 to 25% with the divided field. I don't know if Joe wants to answer this. I have an answer as well, but that is a very good question, I think.
Yeah, I'll take a first swing at this here. It's in these type of primaries, winner does take all. But certainly it does. I think a lot of people have felt like that Cary is probably doing necessarily weaker than what I think we've kind of come to expect from a Trump endorsement. I think certainly if he can hit like 40% tonight, I think that would certainly be considered a victory for Donald Trump tonight. If you can get 40% in this, it's like a 12 candidate field. It's obviously some very limited in seriousness candidates there. I think that would kind of show the pool of the Trump redistrict of the Trump endorsement there. But if he falls under 30, if he wins with under 30%, you would think, especially if someone like a Lurie or a Peterson kind of come close to him, that's, I don't know how much of a victory you can call that in the short term, long term here. And we do have some early results coming in from the highly contested Ohio 11 election, with the first results in from Summit County. So this is part of it. This is Akron and parts of that rural area around it, and the black parts of Akron. Chantel Brown leads 52 to 45 there over Nina Turner. That gives Brown 1,124 votes and Turner 977. So there's some early numbers there from the Akron part of the district. Chantel Brown leading in that regard by 6 points about right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fascinating to see so far. But ultimately, to win that district, you need to win the Cleveland portion, the Cuyahoga County portion. So certainly early so far. Also, I think it's notable Hawking County is reporting in the 15th district, and that's right above Vinton County, which is in the Peterson Senate district. It's one of Vinton and Ross. They're both in the Peterson Senate district. Hawking's reporting, again, only 489 votes, but Peterson is nowhere to be seen there. And while it's not in his Senate district, I was still thinking he would perform. Oh, Fairfield County is reporting now, and Mike Carey is leading Jeff LaRae in his home county. Mm-hmm. Certainly not what he wants to see, and this might mark the end of the regional coalition.
And we just got some huge results in from Cuyahoga County, folks. I'm going to guess early numbers there, but huge lead for Chantel Brown in the Cleveland area. She leads in the first drop there, 56.5% to 35% over Nina Turner. That's about 11.5 thousand votes to about 7,100 for Nina Turner. Just a huge drop there for Chantel Brown. And that's put very early still, we expect tonight. We expected that to be, a decently sized turnout for this primary tonight. But certainly that is a potentially massive one there for Chantel Brown.
But since we've not actually talked about Ohio 11 that much, let's actually go into Ohio 11, because I think this is what a lot of listeners are here for. Is this is what's going on in this district and the really, really intense major dogfight that's going on in this district. It's been one of the bloodiest primaries in recent memory, in my opinion. This has been a really, really intense race. So I can talk about this a little bit.
You can start about that one.
Yeah,
any thoughts?
Yeah. So basically, in many ways, people are touting this Ohio 11 primary as the future of the Democratic Party. On the one side, you have Chantel Brown, who was a more establishment-friendly choice, not a moderate by any means, but an establishment liberal candidate. The other side is Nina Turner. Nina Turner is well known for her national status within the Bernie Sanders campaign, one of his most aggressive advocates in 2016 and 2020. Initially seemed to have a lead in this race. She is a former state senator, I believe, from the district, the area this district is in. She'd run statewide before. She had name recognition. And then the attack started coming in. Specifically, Chantel Brown tied herself to Joe Biden. Nina Turner does not like Joe Biden. This is known. She said that she's refused to say whether she voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016 or for Joe Biden in 2020. And in many ways, this race has become very, very brutal over this topic of supporting the administration. The idea being Nina Turner would be the more progressive candidate, but would she be the one to vote with the Biden administration on its key priorities? And that was the big push here. As many people know, Black voters tend to be more moderate than the rest of the Democratic coalition, even in urban areas. They tend to be more moderate than white liberal voters, which are another major portion of the faction. We've seen in other districts like Missouri, like in Nashville, other of these areas where majority Black districts or districts with large Black populations have had progressive challengers come fairly close to pulling off wins, or in Missouri, pulling it off. But they only did so because of a divided field or because of weak support from African Americans. This district is far more African American, and it's safe to say that their choice will determine this district, especially in a Democratic primary. So basically, this is a fight over the future of the district, the future of the Democratic Party, and where the Black community kind of sees itself within the Democratic coalition.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that is a rough start. I mean, that is a rough drop in early votes from the Cleveland area for Nina Turner. I mean, you really cannot put it, any other way. Then that is a rough drop there. I mean, certainly we've seen some rough drops in here too for people like Jeff LaRae and Bob Peterson when it comes to Mike Carey. We've certainly seen some rough drops for him too here, and I think we're starting to see that the Trump endorsement does in fact matter a decent amount here. Mike Carey's leading in the first drop from Ross County here, which is part of Bob Peterson's state Senate district, which just dropped. It's only by 8 votes. And again, this is early votes. So, I mean, it's possible that Carey's lead could get larger. I mean, it's also plausible this could be somehow smaller. Maybe people from these home areas of LaRae and Peterson maybe voted in person for their candidate. We don't know yet, but certainly Mike Carey, a huge, huge favorite right now, which is still very much showing the sign of the strength in the Donald Trump endorsement right now, after a lot of questions were asked of it after last week.
Yeah, and it's worth noting. I think people are kind of putting a little bit too much stock into winning in a divided field. Winning with 20% of the vote in a primary is pretty embarrassing. Winning with 36% in a divided field, as it looks like he's leading right now, that's not embarrassing at all. It's actually a pretty strong performance in a divided field to get.
And if you got rid of some of the other candidates, I would not be shocked if his percentage cracked 50 and climbed after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're thinking. I think
for his opponents, their regional coalitions have essentially collapsed, and given the fact that the early vote is expected to be at least half of the total vote cast, that's very bad news. So the Trump endorsement has likely succeeded in this district, although we still have to wait to see what the election day vote does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, this is a really important. This is the less important of the two, but I think this is a good indicator. This if Kerry does pull this off, this is a nice bounce back for former President Trump and his endorsements. Although I wouldn't really consider this to be the a really incredible result. This is just more in line with what you would think in a divided field. I would say an endorsement by Trump here does matter. On the other hand, is Mike Carey the sort of Trumpy populist candidate that people are looking for? Is he like a Blake Masters or a J.D. Vance? Well, no, he's endorsed by Trump, but he's not the next Josh Hawley, which is a little bit of a problem for the populist plan. Yeah, it's important.
If he hadn't had the endorsement, he would not have made any traction in this race, and it would have been decided by regional coalitions.
Yeah, it's an important endorsement, but I would again caution that this is a sign of Trump's standing in the party still, I would say, but it's not a sign of a populist resurgence or vengeance, the so-called populist takeover of the Republican Party that has been continually discussed on Twitter by a certain individual account every couple months or so. This is very much in line with, say, Trump's endorsements in other races where he's endorsed standard Republicans that have been allies of him personally rather than allies of necessarily a specific America First populist agenda.
Well, all the candidates are similar ideologically. Yeah. I think this just shows that Trump still has great influence over the Republican electorate. So it kind of rebukes anything so far up to this point that question that. Although it is still just the early vote in a special election primary, we'll get a better view of the Trump endorsement's validity in primaries going into the midterms next year.
Yeah. And yeah, now we're just waiting for additional ones to come in. Just to give you an update again, we've been discussing it right now with less than 1% of with 1% of precincts reporting. Chantel Brown is leading in the Cuyahoga County portion of District 11, 56.5 to 35.1%. And in the Summit portion is leading 51.7 to 45.0%. This is giving her roughly a 20-point lead district-wide. In the Republican primary, Laverne Gore is winning 78 to 22. This doesn't really matter in terms of who wins. I'm just mentioning him because he's there, or her, Laverne. Mike Carey is ahead 36.7% to 18.1% for Jeff LaRae, his closest competitor. Appears to be well positioned in his primary. And Allison Russo is also ahead in the Democratic primary in District 15 with 83% of the vote. So both of these races so far are seem pretty solid for the for Brown and for Carey, respectively. And we got stuff from Vinton coming in as well. So basically, we're getting a good variety of counties here. We've got Clinton County. There's no county that Mike Carey is not leading in, which is a pretty good formula to win a congressional race, in my opinion, leading in every county. That you can't really go wrong with that, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, Vinton, you don't have many votes in. Ross, not many votes in. But both of those are in Peterson Senate District. So that combined with the Fairfield loss with quite a few more votes would show me that the regional coalitions are done. So I'd wait on both of these races, at least until all the early votes in, although most of it will be in shortly. But it appears that Carey should be fine. I would see a projection in this race eventually sometime over the next hour, maybe if his lead keeps up or grows at all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it looks like DDHQ has called the Democratic primary for Allison Russo. There's no surprise there, given the vote, the percentages. That doesn't seem surprising at all. But I guess I'll kind of throw it to the panel. What are you kind of thinking right now with this district? Obviously, the Cuyahoga County portion here matters more than the than the Akron portion, the portion that's going into Summit County. And it seems like, I mean, I would find it hard for Brown to overcome, if she's leading by 20 points in Cuyahoga. That's a pretty good start, basically. That would be a pretty major challenge, especially given I think her base was traditionally in Cuyahoga County, if I recall right, Nina Turner's.
I mean,
she was in the Akron portion.
Both candidates, come from this area. Brown was the Cuyahoga County Democratic Party chair. Turner, obviously, a state senator from the city area. Both home bases from the Cleveland area. Obviously, in this district, the hottest contested area in this district, since it takes in basically the full city of Cleveland compared to Akron.
Almost all of Cleveland.
Almost all of Cleveland compared to Akron, which only takes in only about half about the city of Akron, mainly the majority of black parts of the city. And then, we're going to see some I do think we are going to see tightening as election day vote comes in. I would feel that Nina Turner supporters are probably the type of voters who, for Democrats, would turn up in person on election day. She just kind of has that field of her candidacy. But I think like Erickson, like I said earlier, to be down 21 points in the first drop from Cuyahoga, that is going to be a hard set to come and bounce back from. That is a rough thing to come back from, and it's very, very hard for us to see a path at this point from the numbers we've got from the early vote drops to see a path for Nina Turner at this point, quite honestly.
That being said, if it holds, we're not
sure. If it holds, certainly, but again, as Joe mentioned, as I mentioned before. Sorry, I was just sending out some tweets, but just basically my 2 cents. If you don't win the Cuyahoga portion, you can't win the district. So right now it's looking good for Chantel Brown. But again, only 22,000 votes are in. So this is certainly a district where I would say we're in for a bit of a wait to see, because even though it's a 20-point margin percentage-wise, it's still only about 4,000 votes separating the candidates. And again, it's likely still early votes. So the election day vote is going to be exciting, and I do think the election day vote could make more of an impact in Ohio 11 than it will in Ohio 15, which at this point is essentially, I think it might be, I wouldn't say done, it's still too early, but I think that there's a better chance of seeing a drastic outcome change in the 11th than the 15th at this point, just given the broad nature of Kerry's coalition so far.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I'd definitely much rather be Chantel Brown. You'd much rather be jumping out with a 20-point lead than going behind.
It's a good start. It's a good start.
Yeah, but again, there's only 1% of precincts that are in. So that's kind of important here on both sides. We're waiting in both of these races. It really could matter. Some of these later votes, we've seen it before, right? I mean, the most famous example is the Cori Bush race, where everyone had called Lacey Clay as the winner in that race. Ourselves included, DDHQ, AP, I think pretty much everyone had Lacey Clay leading in that race. And then late votes came in, put Cori Bush over the top. No one expected that to happen. So I think there's been more of an abundance of caution in terms of rating this sort of thing. But I would much rather be be Chantel Brown here.
Yeah.
And this would actually. Sorry.
As you kind of just wait, I mean, it just, as we see more and more of the vote come in Ohio 15, it kind of just becomes more and more clear that this is going to be, Mike Carey's night. It's becoming more and more clear, even as this is just early vote coming in from the district. It's kind of becoming more and more clear. It feels like that this is kind of going to be.
We should be getting election day votes soon, because the combined total between the primaries and 15 was supposed to be about 10,000 votes, and we're at about 9,000, 10,000 votes of early vote. So I think we might have a decision in the 15th before the 11th.
I would agree with you at that point.
So according to what I'm seeing here is that there should be in Cuyahoga County, there should be about 5,800 early votes left and 45,000 election day votes, somewhere in that margin. Summit County will be substantially smaller in terms of its votes. So that's pretty important.
And I guess, folks, if you want just some non-tonight news, I guess, just came across my desk. Bruce Poliquin, the former representative from Maine's 2nd Congressional District, is planning to announce a comeback bid this week against incumbent Representative Jared Golden in Maine's in what's expected to be a very competitive race in 2022. For that twice Trump won congressional district, Bruce Poliquin is coming back, according to reports from Maine. It sounds like Bruce Poliquin is coming back into the race.
We have additional votes coming in from Cuyahoga County. Chantel Brown's lead has narrowed to 53.4% to 39.2%. That's still a pretty large lead, and she's still leading the district by about 14 points, very similar to the current margin. But I figured I would mention that the race has narrowed according to these new results in from Cuyahoga County, according to Decision Desk HQ.
All right, and a tweet will be going out with those updates momentarily.
Yeah. So we're and also from our friends at RRH, Cuyahoga doesn't appear to have precinct results on their website yet. So they're on their website. They typically do these live live mapping things. They need the precinct results, and so they really need that information in there, and they don't have it right now. So we're actually not sure where these votes are coming in from Cuyahoga County. If they're all coming in from Cleveland or the surrounding areas.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see as we really kind of start really seeing this come in. You know, it's gonna be really interesting to really as we start to kind of see the election day vote come in. This is again, early vote tells things, but the election day is what's going to decide. And even in the Ohio 15 race, I think we're gonna have to really see election day vote before we can really start making calls on these type of things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be really interesting, I think, to see here as we kind of get into these next 30 minutes. I think these next 30 minutes are going to be really key here. Well, 27 as we kind of get to 8:30 here. That's really going to be really tell things.
And in between these dumps, feel free to ask us questions. We'll have time to answer them as we kind of go over these results and talk about things that don't necessarily need to be about these two races, but they should be related to politics or elections in general. We are waiting, of course, for additional results. For those who have been who are just joining, right now in the Ohio 11th District Democratic primary, Chantel Brown is leading by 53.3 to 39.6% over Nina Turner. This is based off of a similar lead in Cuyahoga County. In Summit County, the result is very similar. It's a 7-point lead for Chantel Brown, so she's leading in both portions. And in the 15th district, we've called it for the Democratic side in this uncompetitive district. Republican Mike Carey is ahead, 36% to 17.3% for his nearest competitor. Both of these are solid openings for Chantel Brown and Mike Carey, respectively. We're waiting for more results to come in from both. And we could expect the 11th district to narrow somewhat. We're not sure where these votes are coming in from in Cuyahoga County, which could play an impact. Obviously, this is a majority. This is a Democratic district and it's majority black district, but it does have portions that are more affluent and more willing to vote for progressive candidates. As Joe has talked about, the divide between urban black voters and urban liberal white voters the black voters tending to vote for the more moderate candidate, establishment candidate, more accurately, and the white voters tending to vote for the more progressive candidate. So we're not really sure if we'll be able to see that until they start posting their results on their website, which they have not so far.
And that's a fascinating dichotomy you see a lot, like you mentioned with the Lacey Clay Cory Bush primary, the same dichotomy between the African American electorate.
Yeah. And I would expect in the future you could see similar results depending on, for example, if G.K. Butterfield gets Durham County in his district. The talk for now is that if he gets Durham County in North Carolina 1, that makes his district more Democratic. It makes it easier for him to win. But Durham County actually has a lot of progressive white voters, and the seat would still be plurality white by most measures, or at least not majority black. It could be very possible that if you put Durham County into that, he could lose to a progressive white challenger in that district, or at least a progressive challenger. So there's a lot of dynamics that Democrats are going to have to consider when drawing their own districts, or Republicans will have to consider for drawing Democratic districts. Who do you put in? Where do you put them at? how are these voters going to impact it? It's not so much to the point where the Congressional Black Caucus has complete control over who wins these primaries at this point. It's, I guess, the big takeaway now, whereas historically they did. Good question here. Sorry.
That's a really crucial point to make, I think. It's just a different style and how we got to look at it here. But like we've kind of been repeating, it's a bit hard to really see the jump making it happen here for Nina Turner, but it's definitely still possible. She's definitely not dead in the water.
Mm-hmm. And let's see. I'll go ahead and talk some questions here since we don't have any new results coming in. So let's go start this one. This is a question I think I wanted to answer. This is again from the Trailer 50. Do Republicans not vote for candidates based on policy? Why does Trump matter so much? I would actually say Republicans do tend to vote on policy quite a bit. A lot of it tends to be local. Keep in mind, though, like in the Democratic field, Nina Turner and Shontel Brown agree on pretty much everything politically. I mean, the only Nina Turner is more liberal, but on issues like universal health care, gun control, abortion rights, LGBT rights, they're all on the same page, broadly speaking. The question is how far. You see that dynamic a lot in Republican fields as well. And so, like in this one, Shontel Brown has tied herself really heavily to President Joe Biden, who is very popular among the African-American community. Similarly, former President Trump remains popular among Republicans. So having a popular Republican endorsing you doesn't matter so much on policy, but it does matter in terms of knowing who to trust. We saw something in Texas, something similar, although it was a different manner. It was the candidate backed by Rick Perry and Dan Crenshaw won that race. And that's a state where Trump is not beloved. He did win it twice by underwhelming margins both times. But he did still manage to pull that out. And I think it mattered because those local endorsements mattered. Go ahead and, unless anyone else wants to comment, I can go ahead and move on to some other questions as well, because we have some really, really good ones here from the field. Let's see. Oh, you have something, Joe?
Nope.
Yeah. Let's see. So here's another question right here. Here's a good comment. I mean, said no one votes on policy. Eric Adams won Queens, and so did AOC. I think that's a little bit oversimplifying. There's a lot of different areas in Queens. The areas of Queens that AOC represents are majority Hispanic areas. All of Queens, as a whole, is the second or least Democratic of the four major Democratic boroughs in New York. It's right there with Brooklyn. There's a lot of affluent areas in Queens. There's a lot of areas with a diverse population. There's a large Black community in Queens, a large Asian community in Queens. There are policy reasons these candidates win. It doesn't always boil down to who endorses who or racial differences. People do vote based on who they think is going to be the best person to represent them. Candidates, endorsements do play a part, but it's not the only factor people consider when they go out and vote. A lot of times people have local contact, door knockers, or they just like someone's campaign ad. There's lots of reasons you could vote for someone.
I'm listening. I'm just working on some projection graphics and watching results to send out new tweets. Trying to keep here.
Yeah. I mean, again, there's lots of reasons people do it. Another question here. Let's see. I'm looking through on here. Well, here's a good one. Would Democrats have held Ohio 1 and Ohio 12 in 2020 had they flipped those seats in 2018? That's a really good question, and I don't know if I can necessarily comment on the 12th district. I think that one's a lot more Republican than said, but the 1st district is a very competitive district on paper and in practice. This only voted for Trump by 3, and one big factor Republicans have in holding it is that Steve Chabot is very popular. With a Democratic incumbent, it's very possible that you could have seen a 3-point run ahead for the Democrat. The major problem, though, is that Trump did win the district. And a lot of those wave babies that we saw in 2018, people like Kendra Horn or Joe Cunningham, a lot of those sorts of candidates in districts that Trump won still lost, even though they outran Biden by any reasonable margin. So it's still very possible that in both of those districts, if they had flipped, that Republicans would have been able to hold them. I'm going to look at the 12th partisanship here real quick.
But yeah, if I could answer that, I mean the 12th district was still, I believe, like a Trump plus 8 or 9, even maybe.
Yeah, plus 6.
It was still a decently sized Trump district. In 2020, I'd have a very, very hard time. I mean, I think Daniel O'Connor is certainly a decent candidate for sure, and I would guess he would probably be the representative there. But this is just a hard. Mike DeWine won this seat. I think potentially even Jim Bernanke. I think this seat was incredibly close in that regard. In 2018, I have no way in seeing that the 12th would have stayed. I think the first was an interesting question. The first was still, I believe, a barely Trump won county, I believe. So, just for me, it's hard for me to see it happening because I could have very easily seen Shabbat come back in 2020. That could have been very plausible, but
he outran Trump by 4 points. Trump won by about 3 points in the first. But I agree with you. The 12th would have been very difficult even for an incumbent.
Yeah. And another good question here. I think this one's actually really interesting. Which representative would win in states like New Hampshire, Idaho, and Rhode Island if they became single district states? We almost saw that happen in Rhode Island. You had both representatives openly cheering that they weren't having to primary each other. My answer to the three would be Ann Custer in New Hampshire. She is a giant in the second district. I believe it's the one that she represents. It's very popular in that district and would have more appeal there than a Democrat in the other district, which is based around more traditionally Republican areas. Idaho, I think you have to go Mike Simpson. Although he doesn't he represents the Mormon portion of the state. It's very, very Republican rich. Russ Fulcher's a first-term incumbent. It would be or second-term incumbent, I should say. It would be difficult to see him unseating Simpson. And then in Rhode Island, I would think Langevin would have the advantage. Although Cicilline is the more,
I'd agree.
Cicilline's the more liberal of the two, so that could give him an advantage in Providence. But keep in mind, both of them have Providence in their districts, so they both represent portions of that city. So it's not like there's only one or the other.
I'd have to say here, my personal opinion. It's a tough one, but I think I'd say John Tester in a presidential year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the challenge with Tester, obviously, is the state is more. The state is definitely more challenging for Democrats at this point. They had a very credible candidate, and he still lost by 12 points, or 10 points, I should say, in a year that Joe Biden won the presidential election. Whereas Sherrod Brown has proven that he can win in Democratic in Republican years. So I'd give him the advantage in that race for sure. Although I think both are favored to lose if they decide to run again at all in 2024. This is an answer from, it may be J. Miles Coleman. We're not sure. The account's called John Miles Coleman, so I'm going to assume it's him. I think he knows the answer to this. Was Trump a uniquely bad candidate for states like Texas? Yes, I have looked through the results in Texas, and he is a uniquely horrible candidate for Texas. Pretty much everyone in Texas last time won by a very solid margin. I have to find a map here in my list of my epic map list, but the average Texas result, if you take the presidential race out, 9.1%. And I'll actually show you it because I just did pull up the map.
I have something to add when you're finished too.
Yeah, so basically, look at the average results in these congressional districts. The average Republican won Texas 24. Trump lost it. The average Republican came very close in Texas. I believe it's Texas 7 and Texas 32. Trump lost both of those by fairly decent margins. The places he did better are kind of big, but in particular around Dallas in particular, there are areas of North Dallas where Cornyn outran Trump by 10 to 15 points. Around Highland Park, around the college-educated Republican areas, these other Republicans did fine there. It was just uniquely was a very, very substantial Trump problem.
And another thing to add, I know you did the average there, but just looking at the Trump performance in the congressional district versus the congressional Republican as well, raw numbers. I mean, Chip Roy outran Trump by almost 4 points. Troy Nehls outran Trump by 6 points. Tony Gonzalez outran Trump by 2.2 points. I mean, Beth Van Dyne was the most. She outran Trump by 6.73 points because that district ended up voting for Biden by 5.4 points. Even John Carter, who won re-election by 9 points, still outran Trump by 6 points. So Besides looking at the Rio Grande Valley, at least in those competitive congressional districts where Democrats came closer in 2018 and tried really, really hard to flip them in 2020, the down ballot Republican congressional candidates were certainly much stronger than Trump.
Yeah, you can see the districts here where Trump outran Cornyn, and there's not many. In fact, even the Rio Grande Valley. Look at these ones down here: Urban, McAllen, areas in the border in Hidalgo County. Cornyn outran Trump in Corpus Christi. He outran him in Harris County, in Dallas in particular. Look at these margins. I have that listed as 5% maximum here. He outran in these areas more like 5 to 10 points, 15 points in some areas. Austin in particular, there's a few areas where Trump did better, but Trump was just uniquely a very, very terrible candidate for Texas. I don't think there's any question.
Just a quick drop. We're almost done with the early vote in Ohio 15, but we got Madison County, which Kerry has been expected to win. He's leading Peterson, his nearest competitor, by 15 points. So similar to what we expected.
Yeah, Kerry is leading, as far as I can tell, in every county except for Fayette County, where Bob Peterson is ahead. The only county that's not in is Morgan. Kerry is leading in Athens. He's leading in Perry, leading in Fairfield. Again, if you want to win a crowded field, win every single county or most of them in the primary. That probably helps you.
And I'm still willing to bet that, again, if you had fewer of these regional candidates, Kerry's support percentage would arguably go up, not down, because you have to remember that there are quite a few candidates here, most of whom share similar ideologies. And just because someone's voting for Jeff LaRae doesn't mean they would not vote for Trump or a Trump candidate in a heartbeat, maybe if their first choice for regional reasons were to be off the ballot.
Yep.
So I would say if he's even close to 40%, that's a pretty good victory.
Yeah, I would agree on that end. I think that's a very reasonable assessment. And we're still waiting for additional results in from Ohio. I believe right now the total is still 53.3 to 39.6. We're waiting for additional results there. Go ahead and answer some more questions here. Let's look through some of these. What current members of Congress do you feel are likely to become U.S. senators one day? I think there's a pretty good short list. So a lot of the freshman wave babies, Nancy Mace, Stephanie Bice, Ashley Hinson. Those are the three Republicans you should be following. They are rising stars in their party. Ashley Hinson in particular is a known figure, would give Eastern Iowa some representation, maintaining it if, for example, Chuck Grassley decides to retire. I think it's very likely that Hinson would run. It would also free up Republicans in redistricting to look at where they put Lynn County, which is where she's from, I believe. So I would think those three are pretty big. On the Democratic side, it really depends on the state. I mean, Lucy McBath is touted as a potential statewide candidate in Georgia. There's probably a Democrat in Texas that could be a senator one day. But yeah, on the Republican side, at least a lot of those freshman representatives in those districts, they're going to get more favorable ones next time, and they're very well set to be political stars in the future.
I think you have to mention Greg Stanton from Arizona. He's a
mayor of Phoenix.
Former mayor, I believe of where was it? What was it again? Anyway, mayor
of Phoenix.
What?
Mayor of Phoenix.
He was okay. So he was the mayor of Phoenix. Stanton is certainly a guy he's mentioned a lot in Arizona. And I just saw this comment in the chat. Joe Neguis, I don't know how to say his name, sorry, but Joe Neguis in Colorado, who represents Boulder and Fort Collins, especially after his his time in the impeachment trial, the second impeachment trial.
Yeah.
He's certainly a guy who a lot of people are mentioning as a potential guy for Hickenlooper, because not a lot of people expect Negus. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's a guy who I just saw another one, Jake LaTurner in Kansas. Jake LaTurner is a young guy who was the youngest state treasurer in Kansas history, who now represents Kansas' 2nd district.
Yeah.
That's a guy, who could very, very easily be a massive part of the future as well. There's a lot of guys in each state.
In New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill could very well be a senator if she doesn't run for governor. So when Bob Menendez retires in the 2030s, in 2030, if he does retire in 2030, then she will run. But from what I hear, she will not be challenging Menendez when he runs for re-election in 2024 because he's still in the good graces of the New Jersey Dems. So she's more likely to run for governor, which would set up a crazy field between her Senate President Steve Sweeney and Vin Gopal, who's pretty much new to the state Senate, but has really risen through the ranks with the Democrats in New Jersey.
Yeah. A couple other candidates I'd mention in Michigan. I think Peter Mayer is probably going to try to run for Senate at some point in upcoming years. He's really, really popular. We don't know how long his Kent County-based district will hold. Even a fair version of that district would have voted for Trump by a small margin. Probably would have voted for him by a similar margin. He's someone who would probably be considered style in Wisconsin. Definitely Gallagher.
Yeah, I was just going to add that Mike Gallagher could run. That's why I brought up the style.
Yep, and then in Wisconsin, Minnesota, there's a couple excellent candidates. In the 8th district, I'm blanking on his name.
Pete Stauber.
Yeah, Pete Stauber. He'd be a very.
And then you've got Angie Craig in the 2nd district for Minnesota Democrats.
Yep. If we're going even further in places like, North Carolina, I think that it's no surprise Madison Cawthorn wants something higher. It would take him a while, assuming he holds on. I do think he would try something like that. But there's a young delegation. You could see people like Greg Murphy or Patrick McHenry even at some point if he gets bored of the House deciding to run for the Senate. They have pretty long records. Be pretty inoffensive candidates in a Republican primary to be sure for those two. In Florida especially, there's a lot of people who could take advantage of it. I think it kind of depends on long term. I would think they would like to have someone from South Florida running. But you could easily have someone from the Panhandle, some of their Panhandle representatives. Kat Kamak maybe could be a pretty credible candidate in a statewide race. She's kind of come onto the scene lately in terms of her presence in media. She's been much more of a prominent figure than expected from Republicans. Let's take some additional questions right here.
This one's interesting. At the moment, you've got a field of people that aren't really well known. So I'd have to say out of the candidates that are declared thus far, James Craig is probably the most credible, considering he finished 2nd in an internal poll against John James, who could run, has expressed interest, but hasn't stated anything. Mike Cox, the former attorney general of the state, is also considering running, but Craig was the former head of the Detroit PD, and he recently announced, and he seems to be getting the most conservative attention. So given the lack of any other elected officials running that are, credible and have significant name rec, I think that he could be an early front runner, but the Michigan race is certainly not shaping up as well for Republicans when it comes to the field as some of those other Rust Belt gubernatorial races. So I'd be a bit cautious so far.
Mm-hmm. And it's worth noting that Craig is an interesting candidate. Would be certainly an interesting choice for Republicans. A black Republican from Wayne County, from Detroit, who managed Detroit for a long time, the police department. He has expressed support in the past for an assault weapons ban. This would probably be easily hand waved off. That's his biggest issue in a primary, I would think. But he's actually a fairly credible candidate, I think. It could present an interesting contrast for the Republican ticket. Republicans have actually gained a little bit in Wayne County in recent years. Not enough to flip an election, obviously. But, it's the biggest county in the state. It's one of the most populous counties in the country, even in its depleted state at the moment. Having someone there who could get, an additional 3 to 4% of votes in Wayne County is a lot of votes. Is a lot of votes for a candidate in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't write off someone like Craig in a Republican primary.
I think this is all contingent on Speaker McCarthy. And if Republicans do take back the House, then you do have that open whip spot. I think Elise Stefanik would definitely try to become majority whip. But the question of whether or not she wins majority whip, that really depends on the makeup of the House caucus, ideologically and in terms of their loyalty to someone like Stefanik. But we did have a Joe question here about the Pennsylvania governor race.
Yeah, it's kind of just, in that normal 2022 phase of just kind of waiting right now. The rumors are still kind of abound that Doug Mastriano might not end up pulling the trigger on a gubernatorial run like so many expected him to. And it's pretty clear that, Josh Shapiro will be basically uncontested by any serious candidate for the Democratic nomination there. It'll be interesting to see right now, but it's still very much up in the air. It's going to be an open seat in what we expect to be a Republican-leaning year. So, it's going to be an interesting and long race to see for sure.
This is an interesting question, I thought. So Byron Donalds, if you don't know, won a very competitive congressional primary last year against multiple candidates. He only beat Dane Eagle by about a point, but he represents a district in southwestern Florida, and I believe, yeah, it's the 19th, I think. But I think that he'll be fine looking at that long term. Burgess Owens, again, that's a very competitive seat in Utah's 4th. He narrowly unseated Ben McAdams by about a point, one of the blue dogs in the House. It really depends on how redistricting goes, but theoretically, if the seat is competitive, then Burgess Owens can at least put up a fight and win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do think the Utah, I don't think they're going to split any cities. They have technically an independent commission. They usually just draw whatever they want. It would not be hard for them to draw an easier version. I have drawn a statewide version that keeps Salt Lake City intact, that keeps all the cities in Utah County intact. Salt Lake County, sorry, not Utah County. And that still votes for all of them by the statewide margin of like 19 points. That would be absolutely safe for Burgess Owens. Uh, as for Donalds, I think he has a very strong future. I think Donalds is someone who is Republicans like, and he's from South Florida. He provides a voice to the party that's respected, and I think he's presented himself as an interesting figure so far in the party. I would not be surprised if he decided to run for a Senate seat at some point, or at least for some sort of higher office within the state of Florida. I think he's not someone who'd be content being in the House for 20, 30 years, even though he easily could. I think he wants something a little more than that.
Yeah, but in terms of which one's more likely to have a longer career, certainly Byron Donalds rather than Burgess Owens, just by virtue of being younger and at this point having a more prominent voice within the party in the House caucus, and 2, having a more assured seat long term. I'd say DeWine's still most worried about Jim Renacci, or Renacci, however you say his name properly. But Warren Davidson running, I mean, that would just be another entry from the congressional delegation into either the Senate race or the gubernatorial race.
Yeah. The biggest issue with primarying Mike DeWine is Ohio is actually a very establishment-friendly Republican state. It is
absurdly in 2018. Mary Taylor lost the primary bid against DeWine.
Yeah, it is an absurdly establishment Republican state. Let's keep in mind who the previous senators from Ohio have been. Rob Portman, Mike DeWine. Those are the last 2 Republican senators from Ohio. Josh Mandel, when he was the candidate last time, was the establishment choice. Ironically, like this is a state with a big, deep political pedigree based out of the cities that is not necessarily moderate, but more establishment friendly. Oh, Joe says he has something. Let's go to Joe.
Yeah, we've got some election day votes coming in from Hocking and Franklin counties. Franklin County basically stayed the same for the most part. Kerry at around 30.5%, Luray at around 21%. With Stephanie Coons in third place. Washington Post is saying that about 10% of precincts have reported in Franklin County, while in Hocking County, it's actually, I believe, potentially a bit of a hit for Mike Kerry here. He's at 38.7% right now, while Ron Hood jumped up to 26.6% in that race. Obviously, Kerry's still in the lead, but he did drop a little bit. He's down to below 36% right now. He's at 35.8%. So he did take a little bit of a hit from those recently returned numbers.
I still don't see how the opponents, I mean, they'd have to essentially drop out altogether and coalesce behind one candidate, because at the end of the day, the regional coalitions may not have proven to be as significant as we thought, but they still exist, and you still got a split vote amongst all these different individuals from different parts of the state. So, I mean, I think Hawking's important. I mean, that's not in the Peterson Senate District. It's near it. But again, if Mike Kerry continues to maintain these leads, even if they shrink at all, certainly not a good sign for his opponents, because he actually just went back up to 36% where he was. I'm not sure where that came from. But
And one last thing I'd mention in regards going back to that Ohio gubernatorial primary, aside from it being very establishment friendly, Jim Renacci is a terrible campaigner. Absolutely terrible. He does not like to campaign. He does not like to fundraise. Almost all of his fundraising money this cycle came from himself, and the third best donor for him was his mom. He doesn't like to campaign, and he does not like to fundraise. When you're mounting a primary challenge to a governor or running for a statewide office, as demonstrated in 2018, you need to do something. And he has no history of doing anything related to to running an effective campaign. It's just not who he is. He thinks he can kind of skate by with a lot of money, which can happen sometimes, but it's not as much in recent memory. That's one other factor to consider here.
I think this is interesting given the Cuomo news today. So at the end of the day, if Cuomo does resign or he is removed from office or something else happens to Cuomo, Kathy Hochul will assume the governor's mansion. Presumably, that would set up a potentially competitive primary unless she could clear the field if she wanted to seek a full term. But certainly without Cuomo, New York is still a Democratic state, and I don't necessarily think that Cuomo is going to damage the state Democratic Party. I mean, it's certainly bad. It's a very bad image for the state Democratic Party. But I think that Kathy Hochul would certainly have a better shot at this point, obviously, than Cuomo if somehow Cuomo survived unscathed from all of this and then sought re-election, which he is technically seeking re-election.
Yeah.
But I don't want to talk about primary and Cuomo when Cuomo's fate as governor is not even, decided. It's up in the air.
Yeah. One thing I would mention is that if Kathy Hochul does indeed become governor, she'd become the first governor from upstate New York proper since the 1920s. There have been a couple governors since that have had residences in Westchester County or in Dutchess County. Thomas Dewey had a residence in Dutchess County, and George Pataki was in Westchester County. But true upstate New Yorkers don't consider those to be upstate New York. They're in the sphere of influence of the city. Kathy Hochul's from Western New York. That'd be a pretty substantial change, and that could in and of itself inspire a primary challenge, given the dominance of downstate in politics, and specifically not Western New York. When we mean Western New York, we're talking Erie, Buffalo area. We're talking Rochester. Those areas are big, but you don't usually see major statewide candidates coming out of them.
Certainly not. Nor do you see governors from those parts of the state. I think it is important to note, where was the comment? Yeah, someone basically commented, as long as Cuomo stays tight with labor, he can win another primary. And I forget which organization it was today, but there was a labor organization that came out and condemned Cuomo. So it'll be interesting to see if the New York AFL-CIO comes out and decides to condemn Cuomo, because right now on their website, they still say that we stand with Andrew Cuomo and he stands with us, which looks awful at this point.
Yep. It's worth noting, of course, New York has a unique fusion voting system, which would lead the possibility the Working Families Party, the Green Party, the Independence Party have traditionally endorsed. The Green Party hasn't, but the Working Families Party and the Independence Party have supported Cuomo in the last two efforts. It could be very possible if he clears a primary, you still have a progressive running under those three tickets, under the Green Party, under the Independence Party, and under the Working Families Party, which could split some votes off. Go ahead and throw it to Joe.
So apparently, according to Washington Post, I don't know how true this is, but apparently they're saying that all precincts are reporting from Summit County. It's showing Chantel Brown having won that by 5%, with only about 2,500 votes voting in this race. Okay.
Oh, they took it back.
That has changed now, and
yeah, that makes
this is very interesting. This is very interesting. Nina Turner is now only down by 19 votes in Summit County. So this is very interesting now. Nina Turner is now only down by 12 points in the entire district.
New tweet going out.
Now, it's worth noting, of course, the Cuyahoga County portion is the same, and that's going to be the big meat of this district. Being 50-50 in all a 50-50 race in that county, and Summit County does, is make everything rely on Cuyahoga.
And I do have a bit of an update from the Republican primary in the 15th district. We now are apparently about 56% are reporting from Athens, which is has a decently blue part of it. It does have the University of Ohio, not Ohio State, but the University of Ohio, the Bobcats, with apparently about 56% reporting there. Mike Carey holds the lead there, and we're just getting another update from Hawking. Again, Carey with the big lead there. We're not really seeing too much of a difference right now. It looks like from the election day vote to the early vote in Ohio's 15th district Republican primary.
Yep. One thing I'll note here before I think we have a call to make: 40% of the election day vote is in from Summit County, and Brown and Turner are almost even in the county, which gives way to what we're saying. So again, all that would mean is just Cuyahoga County, which is where most of the people in the district live anyway, would be the important one here. But I do believe we're going to make a call here, I believe, for... I'll go ahead and let Harrison.
So, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be calling the 15th District Republican primary for Mike Carey, the Trump-endorsed candidate. Certainly a blow to his opponents, though they share similar ideological views. Their regional coalitions did not hold up, especially Steve LaRae, Steve Stiver's endorsed successor. Up to this point, we started to see Election Day results coming in, and it just appears as we expected that Carey is leading across the entire district with 36.3%, and from what I've seen, incrementally climbing. So once again, Mike Carey projected winner in the 15th district, which completely throws the Washington Post article I saw the other day talking about a potential Mike Carey loss as a blow for Trump out of the window.
It very much proves that the Trump endorsement still has weight. And I would have to say, I just saw this comment. And again, the Susan Wright loss did certainly, I do think, throw some panic behind Trump world. They spent a heck of a lot of money in the final week and a half for Mike Carey.
I would say put the fear of God in them, to be honest.
Yes, It certainly made them spend a lot more money in that race.
Yeah, and again, this is a race where none of the candidates have any major serious ideological differences. This isn't a Trumpy populist versus an establishment conservative. This is a businessman kind of running at some other people who are all conservative because they're from Ohio. Probably be in the Freedom Caucus, I would think, although that's definitely not certain. But this is not a new Josh Hawley or a new Andy Biggs or Paul Gosar. If that's what we're thinking of in terms of the coalitions here, Mike Carey seems much more like a typical sort of Ohio Republican. So if you're part of the populist fan club, for lack of a better term, you may be disappointed with Mike Carey, but in Trump land, they are definitely pleased with Mike Carey, to be sure. Especially given how much of a weight that Mike Carey put into the Trump endorsement.
Yeah, it's like I said, certainly after some concerns, the Trump endorsement holds. Whether that will continue to hold, we don't know. But at least for now, the Trump endorsement certainly holds in this race compared to what it was in the Texas special election. So certainly a bit of a change there. But Carey's, sticking around that 35 to 36% marker, and I don't think really any of us expect that to change. But I do think, between the three state legislatures, or former and current, LaRae, Peterson, and Hood, they all have around 15 to 13% of the vote right now. You would think if maybe only one of those guys had run, is Carey struggling a little bit more compared to what he was right now.
Yeah, but he has a solid.
I would still question that mindset respectfully, only because if you had only one candidate running, I honestly don't know if the other supporters would have backed that single candidate with their regional base, because I still think we're seeing all of the candidates at least performing well on their regional bases and Carey just dominating through the whole district. I don't see why he would have all of a sudden fallen against another candidate that would have just had regional support in a specific area like Steve LaRae or Bob Peterson. I think his margin would have only gone up with candidates dropping out, given the amount of money that the Trump team essentially put into this race in the final week.
Yep, for sure. And, it's an interesting theory, but Carey survives, he wins, and we at this point expect him to be.
Now we can move on to Ohio 11.
From Ohio's 15th district. We expect him to be, honestly, the next congressman from that area.
Safe Republican race so far. And only because normally in down ballot congressional races, there's a tendency for the incumbent to outrun Trump, or at least that's what we saw with Stivers. Obviously, Carey won't be an incumbent, but it's still worth looking at.
Still very much waiting for new results to be coming in Ohio's 11th district. But again, it should be expected to be a lot of election day vote at this point. But we're seeing certainly a big difference here, and it'll be very interesting to see how this continues to go on here as we get into it here in Ohio's 11th district, this highly contested Democratic primary between Shontel Brown and Nina Turner. Have any questions for us, Eric?
Let's go back through some of what we're talking about here. So, some additional questions I believe we've got here. Let me go back and look through here. This is from Avian Justice. Have Trump's support for Ted Budd helped him, or is the former governor still seen as the front runner? It's hard to say. Nobody knew who Ted Budd was before he got the Trump endorsement. It seemed to have befuddled and confused everyone affiliated with the North Carolina Republican Party. That endorsement really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Budd is fundraising all right. He's behind McCrory. In the polls, McCrory's still way ahead. I think McCrory is the prohibitive frontrunner. I would use that term at this point. It's not a decided race. There's time for Ted Budd to make up, but keep in mind, as long as Mark Walker's in the race, he's basically running in the same region, the Piedmont Triad area, Winston-Salem, and Greensboro and High Point, as Ted Budd is in, which is a challenge because they're splitting votes, and then that leaves Charlotte, that leaves Eastern North Carolina, that leaves Western North Carolina for McCrory to go after. If Walker drops out and Ted Budd gets, has that home traditional base around that region, I would think he'd have a much better chance going forward. But as long as Mark Walker is in this thing and Budd's name is not really that much and he's not raising enough to overcome McCrory, I think it's not as – I think it could be an example of a Trump endorsement failure, to put it lightly. I do think that Budd is the favorite – or not Budd. I do think that that McCrory is the favorite in this race for good reason.
And, every so often Trump endorsements fail. Steve Watkins was a notable one against Jake LaTurner last year.
I do have an update from Ohio's 11th District. We got a little bit more in from Cuyahoga. Excuse me for a quick second here. It's not coming now. Okay. But in the 11th District, we've got more coming in here for Nina Turner. She once again shrinks that advantage down to – she only is now down by about 13 points in Cuyahoga County and down by 11 points overall. Another election day vote drop coming in there in support of Nina Turner over Shontel Brown. So really, the tightening is most certainly happening in this district as we see election day vote coming in, which is something that we kind of thought we were going to see, but now we're kind of getting confirmed to those priors here that we've got that tightening coming in from election day vote for this. So this primary here in the 11th district is certainly not over.
Yeah, and I will say, in just for a little bit of an update on the 15th, Mike Carey is now up to 37%. I would not be shocked if he gets above 40% by the time this thing is over, just based on where the votes are heading. I would not be surprised by that at all. I think this is a pretty impressive performance for him in that race. We've already kind of talked about this. But for now, obviously, an 11-point lead right now for Shontel Brown. Close still, not enough to decide on either end. I really want to see more out of Cuyahoga, though, because as long as Shontel Brown is leading that one by 12 points and Summit is dead even, that's still an advantage for Shontel Brown. I really want to see more of those votes coming out of Cuyahoga County, out of Cleveland, out of those areas specifically.
Yeah, and in 11, I just got a confirmation from CINYC at RRH that they might have to wait till all the results are officially tabulated and released to get precinct breakdowns in Cuyahoga. So we're not actually going to be able to tell yet where the breakdown is, although if it's anything like the primary in Missouri's 1st district, you might end up seeing a breakdown between the African-American electorate and the few potential gentrified whites in the district. Because typically we saw this in Louisiana 2 district. If you remember our coverage of Troy Carter versus Karen Carter Peterson, the white voters in the district were more keen on voting for the progressive candidate, and the traditional African-American electorate, the older voters in that case, were certainly taking a look at somebody like Troy Carter and saying, we like this better. So will that exist between Shontel Brown and Nina Turner? We don't know, but we're going to have to see. Let's see.
Yeah, it's just going to be a continually interesting thing to see here as we kind of continue to go on and on here. What's really happening in this district. It's just going to be, if Turner continues to close, we're going to be here then for a decent portion of this night still.
It'll be a fun race if it tightens up.
Oh, it's going to be a fun night if it continues to tighten up as we are seeing right now.
And I think again, this race obviously just got a lot more national attention, not just from Democrats, but from people in the media in general. The Kerry race only really got attention at the last minute after Texas 6, looking at the Trump endorsement. But if Ohio 11 tightens, it really could show in a primary divide the true scale of the fight between the progressive and the establishment wings of the Democratic Party. So like Eric said, it kind of is a battle for the future of the party on a microcosm scale. And again, just waiting on Cuyahoga. But Nina Turner is at 41% now, so definitely cracked 40, over 40 from where she was earlier. Please ask us questions in the comments. Eric's going to be coming back in a few minutes, so to pass the time while we wait for results, which Joe will always report reliably and on time, please be sure to ask us questions, and we can both take stabs at them. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know if we touched on this, but Joe, do you have anything to say about Virginia and the governor's race?
You know, both candidates are running, honestly, in my opinion, very mediocre to bad campaigns right now at the top of the ticket. Neither of them have really been impressive. It's an interesting race. Conventional wisdom holds right now. I wouldn't call McAuliffe a lock, but he's on the right track right now. Honestly, from what I've heard on below, from what I've heard that, if you want to see a Republican candidate get close in Virginia, watch Jason Miyares against Mark Herring in Virginia, the Democratic incumbent attorney general. It's quite plausible that Miyares, I've been told, is probably running the best campaign. There's kind of just a tiredness of Herring in general in the state of Virginia, possibly. He's been there since 2013. I do think some people want to change in that position. I think if you want to watch race where Republicans get close in Virginia statewide, I would say the Attorney General's race would be the one to watch right now.
Yeah, so real quick, just looking at this question, I'm not 100% sure, but just looking at Washington Post, they're about 14% of precincts in with 32,000 votes cast. So we could be looking at or about or exceeding around 100,000 votes. But we're just going to have to wait and see how the votes come in. Will Joe Manchin run or retire in 2024? Joe Manchin's an interesting figure. He certainly liked being governor better than he likes being in the Senate now. He was a good governor. He was very popular. He liked having that independence. And he certainly doesn't like the partisan bickering in the Senate, feeling like a rock in a hard place. But at the same time, I'd say that Manchin actually greatly admires his place of influence, along with Kyrsten Sinema as one of those moderate Democrats who can really make or break a tied Senate majority. So it's up to him. Either way, the seat will flip to Republicans in 2024 in a presidential year, even if it weren't a presidential year. I mean, Manchin would have lost to Evan Jenkins in 2018 if he had won the primary. The real difference in 2024 is if Manchin runs, obviously the Democrats will come a little bit closer, but they still won't be able to retain that seat, even if he does run. He'll just outrun the eventual Democratic presidential nominee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that Manchin likes his position quite a bit, obviously, although he hates the Senate, but he likes his position within the Senate for sure.
Yeah.
Is something I would say is an accurate characterization of him. I could easily see him getting height camped, though, I would call that the term for what happened to him, or Doug Jones even. I think it's more likely he would lose by 10 than by 20. Yeah. But West Virginia is a very, very, very Republican state at every level at this point, overwhelmingly Republican. It'll be a challenge for him to win or to come close in West Virginia in a presidential year with a solid Republican on the ticket. I really think that'd be very difficult.
I'd have to say I still think Shontel Brown is probably going to win, but we have to wait and see how Cuyahoga is going to go.
Oh, we've got announcement of some more results. Nina Turner has taken the lead in the portion of Summit County. She now leads there 49.5% to 47.5%. Nina Turner takes the lead in the Summit County, again, the much smaller but still potentially important part of Akron, Summit County, with apparently 80.5% of precincts in. Nina Turner now leads in Summit County. So Harrison, you're going to want to tweet that out because that's certainly
already doing it. I'm on it.
Yep.
So now
Definitely,
Turner is now only down by 10 points and about 3,500 votes. The tightening, folks, the tightening is happening right now. That is for sure. Again, this is all basically this is all on Cleveland right now, folks. This is very rarely you say that at any type of time in your life. So, when you're listening to me now, listen good. All eyes right now, political world on Cleveland.
Yeah.
For what's
It's
going
worth
on.
noting that it's worth noting that Brown is still ahead 10.4% over Turner in the district, still a double-digit lead. But yeah, taking a lead in Summit is helpful.
And it's the smaller portion, but it can make the difference. If this race comes down to a few thousand votes or something close like that, then having that win, those few extra 100 votes or 1,000 votes in Summit, that's certainly important. If it's a very close race in the end, if it tightens in Cuyahoga.
And it's worth noting that Summit is the portion of the district that Bernie Sanders did the best in previous presidential primaries. He did better in that area than he did in Cleveland. So that's another factor to consider here. Again, I would caution going to any judgments here as to what leading in Summit County means when the most of the vote is coming from Cuyahoga County. But if you look at the areas if you look at where those areas, I'm actually going to pull up the vote because I want to see what the exact totals are in Ohio in 2016 in particular, because that plays a pretty substantial role in terms of internal dynamics within. I believe the district totals are pretty similar, broadly speaking. Clinton did do better in Cleveland than in Akron, but I need actually to see the district breakdown to make that judgment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just basically taking a look at it and saying, well, will the Turner momentum continue to Cuyahoga County or not? And again, we have a big deficit there. I mean, 80% in Summit, but only 10% in Cuyahoga, the most important part of the seat.
Yeah.
Not really that important to the overall outcome, but it looks like Bob Peterson has won the small Fayette County part of the district, the portion there.
Yep. That's a good thing for him, but it's
useless at this point.
Yeah, when Mike Carey is leading everything else and the race has already been called for Mike Carey by most people.
Mike Carey. Yeah, I mean, there are still a lot of votes out in that district, but there are more out in the 11th, and the 11th outcome is more in doubt. So that's what we're really going to be watching so far.
But yeah, let's go back to some of these questions that we're getting. I'm going to go back through and look for anything that's not related to this race, just because a lot of this is basically people rooting for Anita Turner or Chantel Brown, which is fine. We're happy to see people in there, but these obviously aren't questions we can really talk about. Here's a good one. Why does Trump make an effort to endorse in these open primaries that don't have any anti-Trump candidates? I have no idea. I have no idea. I don't know why you would endorse this early, why you would pick someone. Usually it's someone who's connected to his campaign. I think like Max Miller in the other district that's going to have, or in Anthony Gonzalez's district, is someone who's connected to him personally or on a political campaign level. But obviously the wisdom of that endorsement is now in question given some of the revelations that come out.
I think Kerry was a fundraiser for the Trump campaign.
Yeah.
I think he was a donor.
Yeah, it's patronage a lot of the time to some degree. It's just Trump, supporting people who had supported him, if you want to put it that way.
That's just how politics works. So.
Yep. Oh, here's a good question. Which incumbent will have Akron after redistricting given new county split rules make it impossible to fit into Ohio 11? That's going to be a big question depending on what people draw. I mean, any map that I have done personally of Ohio has had a competitive district based out of Akron on the Republican side or on the Democratic side. anything that's there is only going to be competitive by a couple percent. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up our redistricting radar tool, which will be updating once the census results and additional election results come out to kind of show you what that would look like. It's pretty much certain that any district that's based out of that's based in Cleveland will be based entirely in Cleveland, in Cuyahoga County. I don't think there's a reason for them to cross county lines because of this. So let's go ahead and look at the map that we drew here. I believe our version had Cuyahoga or had Akron proper in with Canton, and this would have resulted in a district that is that narrowly voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Oh, here's Joe. Let's go ahead and
Yeah, we've got another update from Cuyahoga again. Tightening. Nina Turner is down now less by 10 points overall. She takes a little bit more in from Cuyahoga County. She's still down by about 11 points there.
Mm-hmm.
But she is now only down by about 9.8. She is down by only 9.8 points now in the district. I'd still rather be Chantel Brown in this moment. But certainly the tightening very much happening now in this race. This is going to end up being very close. We're probably within 5%, potentially even less tonight. It's going to end up being a close race here in Ohio's 11th district for that primary.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's within 5%. Yeah, let's go ahead and go back to some more questions. Look through here and see what we're talking about here. Yeah,
Dave
good comment from Brian.
Wasserman.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Dave Wasserman just noted real quick that a lot of the numbers we've seen in Cuyahoga are early vote for Turner. Wasserman says that the brand new batch of Cuyahoga election day precincts that just came in 20 seconds ago or so went 1,523 to 1,437 votes for Brown. And he says that Turner needs to make up ground if the rest of the election day vote in Cuyahoga looks like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty substantial problem for Nina Turner. But I'll answer this real quick, Brian. Elections. Ohio Republicans continue the tradition of electing mostly anonymous congressmen. Yes, that's generally the case. Ohio loves their generic anonymous white candidates.
I have some news.
Go ahead.
Outside of this district again, but it is with the course of the Missouri Senate race. And the auctioneer himself, Billy Long, the current congressman from one of the districts there in Missouri, will be headed, entering into the Republican primary for the open Senate race left by Roy Blunt, being confirmed tonight. Congressman Billy Long joining.
This leaves Jason Smith at this point because Ann Wagner notably declined to run today and is seeking re-election. So the last undeclared representative is Jason Smith in terms of looking at people who expressed interest.
That is correct.
Billy Long's an interesting character. He's a lot like old school Nick Rayall in West Virginia, a bit controversial. That's all I'll say. You should go read about Billy Long.
Yeah.
Honestly, if we want to talk about, what it would take for Nina Turner to win this district, I'd still have to go with here Chantel Brown, because we would just need to see start to see some massive swings on election day vote for Nina Turner, and we're just not really seeing that yet. Could that change? It's decently plausible, but we're just not seeing that right now, and it's kind of becoming increasingly harder for me to see that as we get in more. Certainly, the race has tightened, but I do not know if it's going to tighten enough for him to win.
Yeah, or for Nina Turner.
Her to win, excuse me.
Yeah, once again, I mean, if Dave Wasserman's take holds up and the remaining election day vote does look like that, it's going to be a bit difficult for Turner to overcome Brown.
Definitely.
We are projecting Brown to win. We're just saying that if the election day vote, and there's still a lot of it out, but if it continues to look like it looks so far, and again, we can't see where it's coming from, then it will be difficult for Turner to win.
Yeah, if there's a lot of narrowing, but the narrowing isn't. But if the narrowing is just going from Chantel Brown winning these by 14 to her winning them by 1, all it does is it narrows the race. It doesn't actually make the race. She needs to be winning these portions basically to overcome a 12-point margin. She can't just go, be getting 50-50 margins. That's just going to dilute the vote, but it's not going to get her where she needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Feel free to continue asking questions here.
So it looks like there may have been some votes dropped out of, or precinct results that have come out of oops, where'd it go? Precinct results that have come out of Ohio. I'm going to see if they're uploaded into DDH or into RRH yet.
Washington Post just projected Mike Carey winner.
Yeah, no surprise there. Yeah, according to Twitter, according to Cuyahoga, they have dropped their election day results in some districts. There's some, not much of Cleveland is in yet, which is interesting. That will be important. But yeah, we'll see.
People, I've been hearing, folks, just to update guys, I've been hearing that there are apparently around 7,100 Cuyahoga votes in total. I've only got about 32,000 in right now. So certainly there is still a way to go here with these results as they slowly start to trickle in now from Cuyahoga County.
Again, like basically what we're talking about here is basic math, right? So Turner's leading in Cuyahoga in Summit by about 2%. That's not going to turn out to be a whole lot of votes. It's basically even. Chantel Brown is leading in Cuyahoga County, which has far more votes than that, by a 12-point margin. Think about it mathematically. If all these results come in and they're 52-48 for Brown, the thing will get close, but that's not actually going to flip the results because she's already leading that portion by 12. So basically what we need to see for Nina Turner is not only to be narrowing but leading in a lot of these returns, ideally by 5 to 10%. Keep in mind she's leading in Summit County, so she can get within 100, 200 votes at this point. That would probably be pretty viable for her, but she needs to do a lot better in Cuyahoga than she is doing right now, even as it is narrowing somewhat.
And I mean, yeah, most of the vote is in Summit at this point, 98% reporting.
Certainly, can Turner still do it for sure? But it's hard for us to see a path. It's just unless we start seeing some massive swings toward her, it is just hard to see a path. Mm-hmm. Will I think the race get closer? I think so. But it is just, and yes, it looks like we basically just got the final draw from Summit County. And actually, the lead for Turner shrunk a little bit there, with about 98% according to Washington Post in. Nina Turner still leads, but only by about 32 votes right now.
Crazy it's not updated that on my end. It's still showing 80.5% on my end.
Cuyahoga is going to be the Seminole County in this race, particularly Cleveland, that portion of Cuyahoga, which apparently we're still waiting on.
Yeah, the very important portion of Cuyahoga County, where Nina Turner's a former city council person.
County.
Yeah.
I'd say if Joe's right about there being about 77,000 votes in Cuyahoga, once we're at 40, 50,
71,000, Harrison.
Yeah, if nothing's changing at that point, when we're about halfway there, quarter left until we're there, then that's arguably bad news out of Cuyahoga.
Yeah. And then this is erasing some of Nina Turner's lead in Summit County, which is one of the reasons she was getting more competitive in this race.
I'd say Hillary Clinton, in terms of being an overarching endorsement, was more important, but one cannot deny the important work that Clyburn did on behalf of Chantel Brown's campaign, given the fact that Clyburn's very influential within the House Democrats, and the fact that Clyburn was on the ground campaigning for Brown last week in the lead up to the election. But, they're both.
Yeah, Clyburn actually showing up on the ground was that was a huge thing in this race. And we've seen Clyburn's influence, especially in seats like this where it's a majority black seat before. And I think certainly his influence is showing right now. He is still very much for at least a massive sector of the Democratic base, a huge influence. And
he was the kingmaker.
I think for a significant amount of time.
He was the kingmaker for Joe Biden in the South Carolina primary the caucus that revived his campaign. So I think it's fascinating there. I mean, he was important there, and he holds a lot of sway, at least in his home state, over the black electorate. So certainly someone that you want to have on your side if you're a candidate for Congress in a Democratic primary. I think that Bernie showing up certainly did a lot to energize progressives in the district. I think the problem is, and we've seen this throughout the country, that in a district with a large African-American population in the past, we've seen that most black voters typically prefer the establishment candidate or the establishment aligned candidate. So I'm not sure that Bernie Sanders excited the African-American electorate enough, and we still have to wait on Cleveland. I'm not knocking anything or issuing an opinion, but it seems that Clyburn being on the ground might have actually been more effective than the Bernie AOC visit for Turner. I think this is definitely an important point for our progressive audience. Certainly Bernie Sanders in both his presidential runs arguably would have been able to win the first time around if he had had more support in those Super Tuesday states with largely black electorates, because there aren't many white Democrats left outside of the suburbs in a lot of those southern states that make or break Super Tuesday. This is also correct. The Lacey Clay district, and that was a race that was decided after the fact. It was actually an upset because everything was originally called for Clay, and then Bush pulled off a very impressive victory towards the end of that race.
Mm-hmm.
I don't deny that. I think that the race would have been a lot closer if progressive support had been unified.
And it's worth noting, obviously, that in that race, Lacey Clay had an incumbency thing. He'd been there for a long time. And also St. Louis, the black voters were more divided than the white voters were. The white voters in St. Louis County uniformly voted for Cori Bush in that primary. The black voters were more divided. Here, this district is kind of demographically similar in some ways. I need to look at the exact demographics, but it is a majority black district. So I believe it's a little bit more so than 50%. It's not it's a 53.5% black district according to Wikipedia, and only 37% white, which is substantially less white than Missouri's first congressional district.
Yeah, and that could pose some interesting dichotomies as well if you want to look at it that way. Because in Louisiana's second district and even in Missouri's first district, you saw less division, I would say, among the white voters in those districts. They were clearly backing the progressive candidate, whereas the establishment candidate tended to draw more, at least half of the African-American support there. So I think that's going to be interesting. There's a comment here asking us about who we predict to win. I think we've made our thoughts pretty clear on it, but again, there's still a lot out in Cuyahoga. The race could very well tighten again. We're just around 9.5% right now. Thank you very much for complimenting our campaign trail series. You can watch that every week. Also, make sure to check out Ranked, the President series with Sarah Stook and Eric Cunningham, along with myself, and we're ranking all the presidential administrations. Those are going to be on Mondays, and the campaign trail is on Fridays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the campaign trail, we're really excited to bring that one back. We had plans to bring that show back earlier, but we had scheduling difficulties. We obviously had the weird Twitter suspension problem that was after during our coverage of the presidential race that kind of made us shift our strategies. But we are doing those on Monday and Friday now, releases for both of those. So we're really excited to start those back up. And you can also listen to them on Anchor. We have them on Anchor podcasts. On Anchor Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, if you've missed them. though we have both of those available there. Yeah, we'll be covering William Jennings Bryan when those come up. We're not doing every presidential administration an episode because some of them they don't have the content for an episode. So we'll be probably getting to that sooner rather than later as we go through some of these administrations. I do want to respond to one comment here, which is thoughts about the Florida 20 primary. I'm only going to say this because I hate Florida 20. I think it is one of the worst congressional district designs in the country. And if you take a look at it, you'll notice the problem with it. I really hope that this is not required to be drawn this way in future elections. It's basically two chunks of Florida connected by uninhabited wasteland. It's got portions of Fort Lauderdale and then portions of Palm Beach. It's horrendous. It is ugly. There's ways you could draw this to be plurality African American that would not require such an unusual draw, literally basically over what amounts to water precincts on land. I would say that I don't know who the result of that will be. That race is not coming up for another year. I don't think Governor DeSantis chose to let that one rest for a while. So, to put it lightly, to reduce the Democratic majority in the House. So we really don't know what will happen there. Obviously,
That's
the
next.
the Congressional Black Caucus will have their candidate and will be an interesting one to look at.
And again, I mean, both these primaries are important because they're tantamount to election, and both of these races are rated safe for the incumbent party by our metrics. But again, I just want to take this point to throw it over to Eric, really, to shout out our Patreon before, well, Joe has an update.
I know, I come back and there's an update, but it looks like, hopefully this time, officially, this is a correct change, but it sounds like all of Summit County is in according to Washington Post. Hopefully this isn't a glitch this time, but Nina Turner has won all of Summit County in this portion, or at least a portion of Summit County in this district, but only by about 60 votes-ish, about 55 votes, actually, so only by about 0.8%. But Nina Turner does pull on Summit County, but not by a margin wide enough for her to come anywhere close to knocking off Chantel Brown's about 11.8% lead right now.
Do you want to send the update out, Harrison, or I will?
I'm sending it out.
Okay, good. Sorry.
But, I mean, it does bring the margin down a little bit. Turner still very much down. She is again down below that 10% gap right now against Chantel Brown. So it's still gonna definitely some room to get very interesting here for sure. But Nina Turner maybe did something that maybe wasn't always expected, but she has won the Summit County portion of this district according to the Washington Post.
Yep. And yeah, I would say that's a fairly important result. Obviously, with that being a little bit closer, really does help out Chantel Brand if this thing does get closer, and it very well could. So that's a pretty important thing, I would say.
And I was going to say, we have 65 viewers on here, so that's a good size. I want to take this moment to thank all of our viewers again. You're always very dedicated, and we appreciate you watching all of our streams. And I was going to have Eric do our typical Patreon introduction that we do when we have some downtime.
Yep. So we do have a Patreon. If you're interested in supporting us, you can always donate to us. We actually have people who've donated to us, but I strongly encourage, if you do want to support us, to support the Patreon instead. We offer benefits there. We have a Discord community where we answer questions, some other benefits as well if you're more interested in more one-on-one interaction. We do interact in the community quite a bit when people ask questions. But if you're interested in supporting us, it's there. Otherwise, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Every subscriber helps us getting to our goals and reaching new milestones. And also, share this with your friends if you like what we're doing. I know you guys do that quite a bit. We get new followers almost every episode we put out of this sort of stuff. And so, yeah, we also have the podcast communities. If you don't follow us on Anchor Podcasts, on Apple Podcasts, we have all sorts of stuff going on there. that if you miss us on YouTube, you can always listen to our audio versions there. So again, thank you guys for all your support. We really appreciate you. We're really always blown away by the support we get from you guys. And we're going to do a quick answer here from Duke Garshina. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Can you do a redistricting radar episode on Dade? We do drafts for 2 Miami R's, and Republicans will have to draw 3 seats. We will do this when the presidential election results come out. We currently, DRA only has 2016 results for Florida and 2018. We don't know 2020. Even Marco Rubio's performance in Miami-Dade in 2016 is not comparable to what Trump got. So we can't really accurately draw based on that performance other than just guesswork. So that's what we're going to be waiting for. We're going to be updating a redistricting radar series and relaunching that when these new plans come out. And obviously our website tool, Redistricting Radar, will get a facelift and an update once we get these new presidential results and the new census results in, because we want these to be not based on estimates. Once the actual population results come in, we want them to be based on the actual census data, which would mean they're the most accurate and the most accurate for you guys and the most approachable, where you can show people and be fairly confident about them. States like New Jersey had substantial undercounts, and states like Texas and Arizona seem to have overcounts. So that's all going to need to be decided once we get those census results incoming. Let's see, some other people. Just want to shout out a couple of people who were nice to us for your information. Again, we really appreciate your thoughts on us. The support is really, really great. And Avian Justice as well, thanking us for the way we cover things. We try to, on these sorts of shows, we try to present it neutrally. You're not going to get what you get from news networks like Fox or CNN here. We try to present things with a level head. Most of us don't have any personal stake in these races. We're not from these districts, so we try to bring a level head and just analyze the data, because that's really what we're all here for, is to figure out who won and what this means for the future. So we're still waiting for those who are wanting an update on Ohio 15. Mike Carey is up to 37.5% now. All of his opponents are under 14% of the vote. Safe to say this is a very impressive performance from Mike Carey all around. He's winning pretty much everything. Again, I think he could get to 40% before this night is over. That's very possible.
Certainly.
Yeah. So that's in a crowded field like this where you had, I think, around a dozen candidates. Really impressive.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if the other candidates had fallen out of the race, how far he would have been able to increase his margin.
Yeah,
60%,
for sure.
70, what? Who knows? Yeah.
And then in the Democratic primary right now, Chantel Brown leads Nina Turner by around 3,700 votes, 51.7% of the vote to 42.1. While we are still leaning towards Brown pulling this off, we are waiting for Cleveland. We're waiting for some of these areas to show up, because it's going to be very important in terms of this. This is all going to come down to Cuyahoga. All the Summit County results are in. Yeah, all the Summit County results are in. They're completely in at this point. So this literally all, and that was basically 50-50. This all comes down to Cuyahoga County, the largest county in the district, home to one of the largest cities in Ohio, and frankly, this is what will matter, because this district will be redrawn and will almost certainly be contained entirely within Cuyahoga County when we're in the coming redistricting cycle. So the fact that Summit County kind of doesn't matter here is kind of a fair reflection of where the seat's going coming forward.
Yeah, and again, like Joe said, we have about 40,000 votes left, so that's a lot. Yeah, we don't know where they're going to go. No shit.
Yeah, and again,
the wrong number. I meant to put 15. We called Ohio 15. I didn't mean to type Ohio 11.
Yes, we're not the election center.
That would be a mistake.
Yeah, we're not the election center. We have not already called this race. Again, I know we say this a lot, but I really do want to thank you guys for your support. It really does mean a lot when we're doing this. We're seeing the interactions with the comments. It really does make this sort of stuff really fun, and we like that we're providing you something that you find interesting. If you have any other questions, let us know. We don't know how much longer it'll be until these results come in, until the Cuyahoga County data is given to us. So that's really where it kind of stands at the moment, where we're looking at in this race. RRH sadly does not have the precinct results yet, which is unfortunate. But we're hoping that these will come in fairly shortly.
Yeah, this race is very interesting. I think it will be a close one in the end. So
Yep.
we honestly have no idea, but looking at the polls and how fervently contested this race was, I could definitely see Nina Turner coming close.
Yep. Well, it's kind of. I mean, it's football's like any, or this is like any other game, right? I mean, in football, you can get up 28 points in the first quarter, and if you just score 7 points you score 10 points every other quarter after that, you win 30-28. That's kind of what this is like, right? I mean, Chantel Brand comes out to a big lead, and now it's just a matter of playing defense and holding up these margins, making sure that she continues leading these bunches. In all likelihood, this will not be within 56 votes, which seems to be somewhat the margin. Around 50 votes is not going to be the margin of this race, I don't think. So unless it gets that close, her just winning most of these coming in 50-50 would still hold where she's at. She has a lead right now in this race with about 10 points. As long as she can just do about 50% of the vote and the stuff coming up, she should be pretty solid.
I will say for the Nina Turner fans in the comments, if Turner does win Cuyahoga, then she would win the primary.
Yes.
So it's really just up to that.
Or she could narrowly lose it by under 50 votes, basically, would be.
Really small margin.
Yep. Yeah. Here's a good comment. If I lived in Ohio, my first vote would be for whoever would fix the stupid precinct shapes.
Hey!
Yes. For those who are unfamiliar with the wonderful abstract art that Ohio calls precincts, there are precincts in Ohio. Typically, precincts are just a geographic area, right? They'll divide a city into like 10 precincts. Ohio has a wonderful idea, which is that we'll have precincts that they're not going to be connected to each other. So we'll just have one of them all over the place. They're kind of scattered around. It's a pain to draw. There is a way to defeat them, though. If you go into the block editor in Dave's Redistricting app, you can get rid of those split precincts and defeat Ohio. This is how we win. As a North Carolinian, we have vanquished Ohio in terms of what we can do here. Ohio is our sworn rival in North Carolina, for those who aren't familiar with the history of states here, because they have tried to steal our claim to fame of being where the first flight is. So I'm happy to be able to say we can vanquish the split precincts in Ohio, even if Ohio refuses to do them themselves. This is a good question. Do you think Ohio could go Democratic again in the next 25 years? I'm actually relatively high on that happening. Basically, Democrats, it all depends on Columbus. Columbus is the type of one big metro that is really dominating a lot of politics. If you look at Columbus, Franklin County, this is rapidly growing, very, very educated voters, very it's basically a very, very interesting area, and Columbus in general is really an underrated city in terms of growth. It's got over 1 million people, 1.3 million people. If places like this continue to grow and continue to get more Democratic spread into the suburbs, then yeah, Democrats could compete in Ohio. There could also be a reversion in urban areas. It is worth noting, though, that Republicans have not maxed out in the East yet. They have not even come close to maxing out in some of these areas.
It's just a matter of, can Democratic trends in the suburbs and exurbs around Cincinnati and Columbus outweigh the rapid Republican tread in the rural areas, particularly along the eastern border? And in the short term, I would say no, it's going to benefit Republicans, but 25 years is a long time. We don't know what the trends are going to be like, but potentially, yes, if the rules max out and the trends continue to look good for Democrats in the suburbs and exurbs of Cleveland and of Columbus and Cincinnati, looking at the 2020 presidential trends, then we should see Ohio potentially fall back into the competitive fold. But for the short time, for the foreseeable future, I'd say that the Republicans have pretty decent advantage in the state in presidential contests. At least
I'm actually drawing something in the election shuffler right now, which is basically just doing two things. It's shifting the Columbus area and the Cincinnati area 10 points to the left. So if you shift all of those counties 10 points to the left, Ohio goes from a state that Trump wins by 9 to one that he wins by 5. That's a pretty substantial difference with just a 10-point shift without the population growth assigned. So, if you're a Democrat looking into the future, places like Fairfield County, like
Delaware County is a big
Delaware
one
County,
too, right above Franklin.
Yeah. Those would be big ones. It's worth noting as well. Cincinnati traditionally is a pretty conservative metro area. Hamilton County has traditionally voted for Republicans. It voted for Rob Portman in 2016. It voted for Mike DeWine in 2006 for Senate when the rest of the state didn't. The Cincinnati area becoming more Democratic does help out as well. But on the other hand, Republicans can point to Canton. They can point to Akron. They can point to the Mahoning Valley, all areas they can gain in.
So I think this is interesting just to further answer the question, and I'm sure this is what Eric did, but if you really just take the counties again around Columbus and around Cincinnati, and you say, let's just get them all marked here. So what are they? Yeah, so I want to get them all in here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can swing it and we can see what the margin looks like. And obviously this doesn't account for, again, the other trends we've seen toward the Republicans. Mostly, I was surprised, honestly, by the strong trends in southern Ohio. But again, there's still maxing out that can be had on the eastern border here. But just for the sake of argument, if you take the 8-point Republican margin, let's say you shift these counties by 5, it's going to be a closer race. If you shift them by 10, it'll be, I assume. But I assume it'll be closer if you shift it by 10. But the real question is, how much do you have to shift those areas to throw it to the Democrats?
Yeah, but we'll throw it to Joe here because he has an update, I believe.
Yes, we have an update indeed. Again, lightning. We've got another little growth here. Nina Turner, I believe, gets a little bit here from Cuyahoga County. She's now down by only about 10.7 points right now.
She's actually down by 8.8%. Yeah, she's down district-wide by 8.8.
Yeah, so definitely a bit of a game there with about 35.5% of precincts reporting, according to the Washington Post, in this district. So for sure here, definitely, again, the tightening is happening once again here in Ohio's 11th district, but certainly, again, tightening definitely happening in this district.
But yeah, this is a decent result for Turner, but it's less than what you would want. She would want to be gaining larger numbers than what she's getting right now.
So yeah, I've just been playing around still with the election shuffler on that question. And I'm going to work on shifting the rest of the state to match the other trends we saw in 2020. But right now, I think I've shifted those counties 15 points toward the Democrats, and you end up with a margin of less than 1 point for the Republican.
Yeah. If you shift at 25 points, you get about a 2-point margin or about a 1-point margin for Democrats. And that's just shifting those specific counties. You could see further ingrowth into all of the collars around Columbus, and also it doesn't account for population growth or turnout percentages, right? So, yeah.
Again, like many rural areas too, a lot of these eastern towns trending toward the Republicans pretty rapidly. You have seen population decline, kind of like downstate decline in Illinois versus the collar counties.
Yeah. And since we have a little bit of a lull, I'm going to go ahead and mention a few of these results from Michigan. There's also Michigan primaries tonight. Detroit's mayor primary, Mike Duggan, the incumbent mayor, is leading that nonpartisan primary 75 to 10 or to 9%. So pretty solid night for him. I don't know if they do a top 2 or what, but obviously this is a good night for him. The Senate primary in District 28 is about as close to as you can get. 35, 34 and a half, and 31 and a half for in the Republican primary. They're currently led by Mark Gonzaga, I think. And then the Democratic side is 61 to 39 for Democratic primary candidate Keith Courtdale. There's also a Republican primary in District 8 in the Senate in Michigan. Douglas Wozniak is leading that one 52% to His next competitor has 27%. This is with about a third of the votes in. And the Democratic side there, Martin Genter is leading 70-30. So those are just a couple of the Michigan results that are coming in as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to go ahead and unhighlight this comment since we've kind of gone over it already.
Yeah.
I want to respond.
Decision Desk HQ for the results there.
Yep. We'll link you the Decision Desk link in the comments. Our good friends at Decision Desk. Someone asked we should check out Presidential Infinity. We have. I have bought it, but I've not actually played it. Yeah, I bought it. I haven't played it. I bought it before the Catalina update on the Mac, and so I couldn't play it. And now I have it installed, but I've not actually gotten around to it yet. I got the 4-in-1 bundle with the other 3 Infinity tools, so I got to start messing around with that at some point. We have played the political process, though. Harrison is a big fan of the political process.
Armin and I frequently play the political process. In fact, he made a political process preset scenario for all of election Twitter with 435 representatives that you can play.
My favorite is when Harrison had me running in North Carolina and inexplicably losing every county in the state of North Carolina because the policies implemented were terrible.
You were running both times we ran the political process preset scenario. The first time you ran for Senate and you lost, but you beat Walter Jones in the primary. The second time you somehow lost to a Democrat in North Carolina's 5th district. But you become speaker. For some reason in the game, Joe's character always retires after 1 term. I don't understand it.
You got to send this preset over. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically a waiting game at this point. We're waiting for the Cuyahoga precincts to report. There's not really a whole lot other to go over technically. I would mention someone made a good question. Could Florida Republicans be concerned about Democratic swings in Duval, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Seminole? Duval, maybe. That could, that's a big county, but it's also, a lot of it is, I think, racial. Oh, sorry. Joe is something.
Got another drop in there. And again, Turner. It looks like there's some gains. Again, the race is dropped down. It's now an 8-point race on the nose, 51-43. In favor of Chantel Brown, just under about 41.5% of all precincts reporting here. But again, Turner, the tightening definitely happening. Turner now only in an 8-point deficit.
Yep, she won this match by 13%.
Mm-hmm. And Cuyahoga is now officially under 10% between the 2 candidates. It is now officially under 10% between the 2 candidates.
But I was going to mention with Florida is that, yes, those matter, but I think what matters more is, as someone mentioned, Volusia County matters a lot more. Pasco County, Miami-Dade County, frankly, Palm Beach County, which has trended Republicans before Trump. Palm Beach is a promising one for Republicans in the long term. And even Orange County trended slightly to Republicans. Orange County, I believe, one below it. Florida is a really challenging state for Democrats for a lot of reasons. They're not going to be winning the state if they're only winning Dade by within 10%. That's just probably a pretty straightforward statement to make there, I would think. I mean, going for 2020, 2022, I would say honestly it's more likely that DeSantis wins Miami-Dade County than it is that he loses the race. That's about where I think the state of things look, to be honest. Mm-hmm. Democrats have really got to improve in South Florida. That's really what it boils down to. If they start losing Miami-Dade County, they're basically done in Florida. They'll always have Broward, but Palm Beach and Miami-Dade in particular, 2 long-term ones. Miami-Dade is tricky. It's a really tricky county to look at because it's swung so wildly in recent elections. Palm Beach, though, has had a pretty consistent trend towards Republicans in recent years. If you look at the local level, it's gone from a county that went to Barack Obama 61-38 to one that went to Trump or went to Biden by only 12 points, 56-43. That's actually 13. and that's actually down from 2016, where it went to Hillary Clinton by about 15 points, and that's down from 2012, where it went to Obama by 17 points. I'll be very concerned long term about Palm Beach if I were Democrats, because it's a problematic area.
It is just I just don't know if I see the numbers coming in here for Chantel Brown. For Nina Turner here, folks. It's just getting harder and harder for me to really see. There's nothing. I mean, it's getting tighter, but there's nothing in these results that we see that says, "Hey, Nina Turner is going to be able to come back."
Yeah. And I think we may be having a call here fairly shortly. We're looking at this one last time before we pay attention here, but the numbers that are coming in for Nina Turner, as I mentioned, are just mathematically not what you need to do to win. She needs to win these by large margins to cut down the 12% total, or to cut down the 8% total, and the closer to 50-50. We're giving it a little bit more time just to think through here. Yeah, we're going to give it a little bit more time just to be sure. But I believe some other commentators have called it for Chantel Brown. Cook, DDHQ, and Dave Wasserman appear to have called it. We're giving it just a little bit more time just to be safe. But people seem pretty high on Chantel Brown right now. This would be another substantial polling failure. Polls have consistently shown Nina Turner to be. Ooh, that's a good point. Yep.
And with that, we can officially project that Chantel Brown will defeat Nina Turner to win the primary for the Democrats in the 11th Congressional District. The tweet just went out. It is official. She currently leads by about 8 points. It's just unclear if there's enough remaining in Cuyahoga to do more than make this a slightly competitive, close race, but not enough to win. And that is the conclusion to an early primary battle between the establishment and progressive wings of the Democratic Party, and certainly the most important race of tonight.
Yep. We should stay on just for a little bit longer. Some of these results come in. I do think it's worth watching them. We are projecting Chantel Brown to win, but I do think it's worth watching just for the possibility of a Cori Bush style thing. We still don't have all of Cleveland in. So I'm gonna stay on at least for a little while longer. I think we could probably stay on for
No problem with that.
Yeah, to go over these results. The number of people that are
how close it ends up being.
Yeah, the number of people that are calling these are pretty substantial. And again, these results, we need all these results consistently. So let's go ahead and kind of look at what the total is right now. What we're looking at in terms of these.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on there. Sorry about that.
So basically, what we're looking at here is right now, Chantel Brown is leading 51.1% to 43.1%, exactly 8%. And in Cuyahoga, she's leading by about 9.5%. What we're seeing coming in is just not the totals that we're going to need to flip this race. I do want to stay on until Cleveland at least comes in a little bit to go over, but the rest of, again, the Cleveland portions are going to be the more African American heavy of this district to begin with. So just going off the St. Louis standard, you would expect these areas to go more for someone like Chantel Brown than to go through for someone like, for example, Nina Turner, just based off of that. If these outer Cuyahoga portions are not going towards Nina Turner, I think this is problematic. I don't think there's necessarily an assumption that the city is going to vote for the exact same as the rest of the county. But yeah, DDHQ has called it Nina Turner, DDHQ has called it.
Is interesting as well compared to similar districts, because you don't have the same population of progressive white voters that you would have in, say, another district. It's a bit interesting when you look at the dichotomy of this district, because It basically is just connecting the African American population in Akron with the population in Cleveland, and that should bode well for Brown in the end.
Yeah, and if you're thinking about it, I mean, you're thinking about this total. It's a big win for the Congressional Black Caucus. It's a very, very big win for that. I think Chantel Brown ran a very, very good campaign. She focused on current issues. It seemed like Nina Turner was focusing exclusively on people who supported Bernie Sanders in 2016 and 2020, which is a fine approach. But, Hillary Clinton won the district and then Joe Biden won the district in those two contests. A pretty big disappointment for progressives, as someone just mentioned in the comments. Another thing I'd point to is kind of the insular local nature of this. So this is kind of the CBC reasserting its influence. Troy Brown versus Karen Carter Peterson. Troy Carter managed to win that race. The same sort of dynamic in a district that has more white voters. I would say, from my perspective, I think you need more of a floor of about 40%, 40 to 45% of white voters to really make a very, very credible win for a progressive candidate, to be one where you could be to an incumbent challenger. In an open race like this, somewhere that's around 40% white, it's a little bit less of a challenge. But I think there's a couple of lessons that can be taken away from here. I mean, Turner was leading this thing by 35 points early on. How do you guys think that Chantel Brown was able to overcome that early lead for Nina Turner?
Well, I honestly do think that Chantel Brown had more appeal to the black electorate in the district than Nina Turner. And I think, like you said, Jim Clyburn coming on the ground and campaigning really represented the full momentum of the Congressional Black Caucus. And I honestly think did more than the Sanders AOC visit for Turner in the final weeks. And that's not at all a knock against progressives. I'm not stating any personal opinions here, but just looking at the results we've seen in this race and other races prior to it, I think the progressive Democrats need to try and work on appeal more to older black voters, many of whom make up these electorates.
And I want to respond to hear someone saying this is a crude analysis because black populations are stratified by class, geography, and age. Yes, this is the case, but so are white voters in a district like this. The problem for Democrats, broadly speaking, is that in terms of their voter base, black voters overwhelmingly, whether they live in urban or rural areas, are the more conservative faction of the bunch. They're the more likely to support establishment candidates and moderate candidates. Does that change someone in some of these urban areas? Sure. But progressive wing of the party has always been led, the liberal progressive wing has always been led more by white voters than it has been by black voters. There's certainly loud activist voices in the black community, and there are many liberal candidates that are popular with black voters. But for these hardcore socialist progressive candidates, it's more of a challenge to overcome that.
Yeah, it's hard to say. And it is fair to mention that there was a lot of money spent in this race for a special election primary. Yeah. I mean, we had almost $4 million, spent in this in a primary. $4 million. That's quite, that's quite a lot of money.
That's not chump change.
No. And, it's just, obviously there is a point to this that Chantel Brown was able to heavily outspend, thanks to outside sources, Nina Turner. The Democratic establishment arguably came home and their donor base came back and, did not want Nina Turner to win this race.
I just want to briefly note that this is not an incorrect statistic about Sanders and younger black voters, but even in the Louisiana 2 primary, as John Couillon repeatedly mentioned in his analysis, the black electorate there was largely 65 and over. Almost 80% of it was 65 and over. And they overwhelmingly voted for Troy Carter. And something similar could be happening here. If there were higher turnout among younger voters in general, I think Nina Turner probably would perform a bit better.
It's not crude, I don't think, what we're doing here. The fact of the matter is, as a whole, as a majority of a bloc, African Americans still at this moment, as a majority bloc, do still support the more moderate candidate. It's just been kind of the fact that we've seen throughout the race. And I mean, even in Missouri's first, that race for Cori Bush's victory was driven by her support in the southern white area of the city compared to still decently strong support for Lacey Clay in the black northern parts of St. Louis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
You know,
I actually have a great map that shows this pretty much perfectly. This is actually the 2018 election, but you can see the exact dynamic here. These are the white and the black areas in St. Louis. Look at this right here. Look at where Cori Bush did better in 2018. That kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, it really does speak for it. And then you look at the 2021 where Cori Bush did better. She did really good South St. Louis, the white area. The black area, she did poor. It's a crude analysis for sure, but it's one that tends to follow pretty clearly. The more white voters there are in a precinct, the more people were willing to vote for Cori Bush.
and
Just because
honestly, you
black
know what?
voters didn't.
Here,
But
I think I think there is a good point to make with going back to what I was talking about before we got into the little sidebar there. You know, again, the money certainly mattered, but I don't know if that money would have come if Nina Turner had not put herself on the, drawn attention to herself in this race by, again, not being willing to say if she voted for Joe Biden, kind of saying some bomb-throwing comments again in this election. If you're not showing that you're kind of going to be willing to cooperate and going to the House of Representatives, and you're going to be a solid vote in a solid Democratic district, outside establishment sources are going to spend and, collectively get up against you. And that's happened to Nina Turner in this race. It's just a true and factual statement that, if you can't say that you voted for Joe Biden in 2020, that is a tough thing. And, look, Nina Turner has had questionable things. She went out and openly supported Jill Stein in 2016. She, has kind of had ties to this very weird People's Party movement that we've seen in far left circles. There are legitimate questions on whether or not Nina Turner would have been a solid Democratic vote. I do not think it is just her ties to Senator Sanders that would have ended her here. If it was just that, I don't think there would have been. But there are other much larger question marks than just her 2016 support of Bernie Sanders. It is the support for Jill Stein after that regard, her open, open attorney, open wanting to see, open acceptance of potentially, of Jill Stein's vice presidential nod in 2016. There were a lot of questions here about Nina Turner, and that, of course, that's going to cause that is going to cause problems. Mm-hmm. When you are in a safe blue seat like this, that is going to cause problems. The establishment is going to spend against you, and really, this is less surprising than I think, we should treat it as. This is just the case where people do not want someone who has announced themselves as a bomb thrower going into Congress. None of the squad were seen as bomb throwers when they first got elected in these primaries. That's why, they didn't really have that heavy regards against them.
They certainly weren't seen as aggressively opposing the current Democratic president or previous nominee.
Exactly. Nina Turner was seen as that.
Yeah, and none of them said they weren't going to vote for this. Yeah, none of them said they weren't going to. They didn't refuse to say if they voted for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. Like, that seems like a pretty baseline of any candidate in any primary. When you have Nina Turner out there, you got Joe Biden, really popular among Democrats right now, historically popular among Democratic voters, and Nina Turner is out there saying, well, I can't say if I voted for him or not. So voters may have had a problem with that. That's one thing. That's just one element. Even if people liked more of her campaign, there may have been issues with her person. Like, there's a lot of reasons this sort of primary can make beyond policy. Because it goes without saying, this is a very liberal district. This is a district that went 80 to 20 for Democrats, does so on a consistent basis. But yet, this is also one that's going to choose an establishment candidate over a progressive challenger. Just a quick response for Finn's here. Joe Biden is not historically popular, but he is historically popular among Democrats. Democrats like Joe Biden right now more than they liked Barack Obama. The totals, I think, around 95 to 98% approval among Democratic voters, or Democratic identifying voters if you look at polling. That's what I mean by that. The number of Democrats who are not fans of Joe Biden right now, don't approve of his performance, is fairly low, historically speaking. Yeah, and again, a quick response to Finn. Yeah, it's due to deep division. Joe Biden is less popular among Republicans than pretty much any other Democratic president, and Joe Biden is more popular among Democrats than pretty much any other Democratic president or president. Period. Um, that's really what it boils down to. We have a lot of polarization, but fundamentally, being aggressively opposed to the agenda of the current Democratic president who was just elected and won 80% of the vote in the district might not have been the wisest idea. There are other progressive candidates who made their message of their more socialist leaning ideas or progressive ideas that did very well. They did so by running a positive message or running for change. They didn't run against the Democratic agenda. They ran on supplementing it, right? They ran on doing more things Democratic voters want, not on dividing in terms of who should be in charge of the Democratic Party, who should be the leader of the Democratic Party. Nina Turner aggressively wants people like Bernie Sanders to be in charge. People like AOC, for all they talk, they're voting for everything Joe Biden does, which really says a lot. But yeah, we're going to keep going here for a little bit longer. I think we'll probably pop off at 10 o'clock or so. We did get some more results come in from Ohio. Again, we've called this race, so we're just kind of going over what comes in. We have called the race for Chantel Brown over Nina Turner. Additional results have come in from DDHQ. The lead of Chantel Brown is now she's at 50.42% compared to 43.84 for Nina Turner. That's about a 6.5 point margin. So that does play a role there, but we're expecting this to be fairly close. But we do think that Chantel Brown's going to pull it off, and pretty much everyone else seems confident about that as well. Dave Wasserman, Decision Desk, have looked at the data, and there's not really a path for her votes at this point for her getting past this margin. Again, we're kind of waiting at this point. We'll probably hop off fairly soon, just because we got most of the interesting stuff out of the way here. I'm trying to figure out how much of Cuyahoga County is left incoming. In terms of what is outstanding in Cuyahoga County. Appears to be about again, the Cuyahoga County totals right now are still at the moment very similar to the actual vote total. 50.8% for Chantel Brown, 43.1% for Nina Turner, with the Summit County portion having gone to Nina Turner by a very, very small margin of under 60 votes. And this is another good point in the comments that even though the race is on paper getting closer, raw margin is actually improving for Chantel Brown. This is something you can see in math where a race can get closer on paper in terms of percentage, but the raw total of votes actually grows for the other party. This is actually something that happens in presidential races quite a bit. You may see a race go from 65-35 to 63-37. But if there's an additional 5,000 voters turning out, that's actually a raw vote total increase for the candidate for the candidate who had won both races, right? So that's something we're looking at here. Again, there's lots of reasons that went into this decision. There's just raw vote. So like again, a good example I think I can do of this is Brunswick County. I'm going to look at Brunswick County, North Carolina, and give you an idea of what we're talking about here. Raw vote is just the actual votes that are in, not the percentage of votes. Percentages can be kind of misleading sometimes. So in 2016, Donald Trump won Brunswick County, North Carolina, 62.5 to 34.1. That's a 28.4% margin. In 2020, he won that same county by only 25 points. So on paper, that's a pretty substantial increase for Democrats. That should mean more. That should mean a closer race in terms of margin, right? Well, that actually wasn't the case. In 2020 or 2016, the margin there was 19,438 votes. In 2020, the margin had improved to 22,270 votes. So the race got substantially closer on paper. But in terms of raw vote lead, that total improved for former President Trump at that point. That's kind of what we're seeing in some of these. Even if the race is getting a little bit closer percentage-wise, the raw votes that Chantel Brand leads by isn't changing that much.
It's like I said, it's just hard for us to see, where this is going. This is just it's almost impossible to see Turner winning with what's coming in. It's just I don't know the best way to put it, but it is just hard for us to see, anything come close to it. Just the vote total's not there. If reports are correct, we've only got about 21,000 votes left. We said there were about 71,000 in Cuyahoga County. Apparently only got 21,000 votes left then. So it's just kind of how this goes right now. Yep. Chantel Brown, in this safety district is going to be the next congresswoman. She has won this primary. She is going to be the next congresswoman from Ohio's 11th district.
Yeah. Unless something really wacky happens, which we don't foresee happening, there's really little reason to think that she won't win.
Yeah, and we're going to keep you updated on Twitter today and tomorrow, but we are going to be reaching the end of our program for tonight because we are bleeding viewers pretty quickly, and the outcome here is all but certain in both races. So I guess I'll just take this moment to thank all of our viewers again for staying with us. You're very dedicated, and we always appreciate your viewership. And please continue to check out our Patreon and our social media, our YouTube channel, all of those important things where we produce brilliant content. We're also on Apple Podcasts with all of our programs.
Yeah. So again, thank you guys for watching. We'll go ahead and tune off for the night, but we'll continue updating you as the final results come in on our Twitter account at elections_daily. Again, thank you guys for watching. Subscribe if you liked it, and we'll see you for the next election.